Good evening, and welcome to the City Council study session of January 17th. We are here to discuss the bond issue that we are considering for April. It's already been on first reading. The transportation bond, the stormwater bond, and the stormwater utility. We will primarily be discussing the stormwater utility.
So I wanted to start with a couple of great videos that were produced in-house, just so that you know we've been working on some additional things besides just the bond and utility efforts that you're familiar with.
Norman is a beautiful city, full of life and art. But like all Oklahomans, we here in Norman know that that can change in an instant. Rain certainly has its benefits, but too much of a good thing can be bad, and we need a way to manage that. That's where the City of Norman's stormwater management system comes in. Let's take a step back for a moment and answer an important question. What is stormwater? Water falls from the sky in various forms, like snow, ice, or rain. When this precipitation hits the ground and other hard surfaces, anything that doesn't get absorbed into the ground is what we call stormwater. It's this runoff that needs to be managed. But where does all this stormwater go, and how does it get there? After precipitation hits a hard surface like a roof or driveway on your home or business, what doesn't absorb into the earth or evaporate will likely first run into the nearest gutter. These gutters direct the flow of water to a nearby inlet. You've probably seen drains like this all over town and in your neighborhood. Once stormwater enters these inlets, it flows into a network of pipes that run underground all over the city. These pipes carry the stormwater to the closest stormwater management feature, like a pond or creek, without any kind of treatment. Don't have gutters and storm drains where you live? Well, your stormwater still has to go somewhere. In areas of Norman without storm drains and pipes, stormwater is generally carried by a series of above-ground features. These features include things like drainage ditches, creeks, streams, and detention ponds. All of these things work together to help regulate the flow of stormwater, reduce flooding, and facilitate its journey to its ultimate destination, Lake Thunderbird or the Canadian River. Most stormwater runoff in Norman eventually makes its way to Lake Thunderbird, which, besides being a wonderful natural recreation area, is also the source of Norman's drinking water. The City of Norman's stormwater management system is a vital set of features that keep the city beautiful and help prevent some serious potential problems.
Nice job, Bryce.
So those of you that participated in the Stormwater Citizen Committee may be familiar with the video from Columbia, Missouri that we showed. And we showed that to Bryce and talked about some ways that we could do something similar, and we kind of viewed this as a series of videos. And so we wanted to start out with first talking about what is stormwater, right? How do we manage it in the city? That's what the first video is. The next video is, why does it matter?
Whether you live in town, in the country, or in the suburbs, when it rains or snows, all the water that runs off the ground needs somewhere to go. This is why we have a stormwater management system. But why exactly do we manage stormwater? And what's the worst that could happen if we didn't? One of the first major reasons we have a stormwater management system in place is to reduce and control the pollution of our vital waterways. Stormwater runoff picks up anything that is on the ground and carries it along with it.
So imagine that water falling out of the sky onto the street or onto the parking lot at your favorite department store. And if there are oils and greases or trash and litter, all that's going to get picked up in the water and taken back into that river or stream or lake, and that's pollution. And we certainly don't want to pollute our rivers and streams and lakes. Norman is different. Not that we're the only city that drinks, as we say, we drink our stormwater here in Norman. We're not the only city in the country that does that either through a lake or through a river, but we do that here. And so about 70% of our water supply, the water that we drink at our homes and our businesses, comes from Lake Thunderbird. And Lake Thunderbird has been proven or determined to be polluted or impaired is the term that federal and state regulators use. Now, I want to clarify that we have a water treatment facility. The city manages that part of our system as well. And I get that question a lot from folks. Well, can't you just put it through the treatment plant and clean up all that pollution? And absolutely, we do that today. The water we drink is very safe, even though it's coming from this polluted lake. The concern is that if we don't do something now, that pollution over time in Lake Thunderbird could get so severe that we would not have the ability to clean it or to treat it at our treatment plant. That's really the reason we want to stop the rate of pollution or the rate of contamination now, so we don't have to face that in the future.
The effects of pollution on our water supply are certainly serious, but stormwater runoff can also have a much more immediate and physically damaging effect: flooding.
When it rains really heavily, and it does in this region, we get very heavy or high-intensity, low-duration storms, or meaning 3 inches or 4 inches might fall in 30 minutes. And basically, the system can't handle that. And if we don't have a system that's large enough or adequate enough to keep that water away from properties, then we're going to have flooding of homes, businesses, schools.
Flooding is also a significant public safety risk, as it can wash out roads and strand motorists. Norman resident Bill Scanlon has felt firsthand just how devastating stormwater can be when it gets out of control.
We moved here in 2003, intent on this being our retirement home, enjoying the proximity to the kids and grandkids. And we did really fine until waking up the morning of May the 6th, 2007, and being ankle deep in water. That episode we hoped would be the last. It wasn't. We've flooded in this house 2 more times, in 2015 and 2016. The 2015 episode happened in the evening and resulted in $101,000 worth of damage to this house. My house sits at the end of a cul-de-sac, and our house, I believe, was damaged more severely than others in the neighborhood. But there were several other houses in our immediate area, adjacent to me and behind me, that all experienced some level of flooding. It's scary to look out, and you've seen some of the videos I sent you, but imagine a torrent of water running through your yard to the extent that if a little kid steps out on the back porch and happens to take 1 step too far, they fall into this torrent. They're gone. The rush of water is that fast. It is really, really dangerous. When rain is predicted overnight, I'm up watching it. I'm watching the weather radar. I'm looking out my front door. And I'm just praying that water doesn't visit our house again as it has in the past. It is really a gut-wrenching experience. And again, I mentioned feeling helpless back when we first experienced the flooding. It repeats itself. You see water creeping up to your doorstep, and you know that there's nothing you can do.
If not properly managed, stormwater can have far-reaching consequences. It affects our property, our environment, our economy, and our safety. Stormwater truly affects everyone.
For the video, not the situation. Right.
I hope it matters.
Sure does.
Okay, Carrie.
Okay, so I just wanted to show those, to give you an idea of what we have been working on, to talk about those. You can see from those videos, it talks about the key areas that we're discussing, and as we talk about stormwater, the committee really wanted to talk about water quality and flooding aspects, and you get that from both videos, and you get the idea of why we need it and what's occurring and things like that. And I think we've got a couple more videos in this series that we're going to be working on. I'm going to work on one that's more directly related with infrastructure maintenance to show why and how that occurs and why it's important. So I wanted to start off with that and get you all excited about stormwater and ready to talk about it. And I think the next step, make sure I've got my schedule right, is for Amanda to talk a little bit about some of the committee work, and just to acknowledge the committee members that are here today. Stormwater Citizen Committee members, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand so everybody knows who you are. These folks have given a lot of their time. They are very dedicated. They come to all kinds of meetings, open houses, ward meetings, and they're back here today, and we really wanted to be able to give them the opportunity to talk to you as we move forward with this.
So I'm just going to do a quick review of the process we went through, why we made the choices we did. I want you all to have an opportunity tonight. I'm sorry I can't see everybody, but I want you all to have an opportunity tonight to hear from other committee members. I think you guys have heard from me plenty, right?
Amanda, I think if you stand up,
Okay.
it'll make it easier.
I can get that chair out of the way. So, anyway, I hope that there's an opportunity a little later for the other committee members to speak to you, because I think you've heard from me enough. But we started meeting in May of 2017. I think all of us thought it would be a 2 or 3 month process to kind of iron out the next plan. And it is January of 2019, and we're still here. So we met for about 10 months every other week, and brought forward to you last spring 2 recommendations. One is a bond for large infrastructure projects, and the other is the utility rate structures. There were 3 options on the utility rate structures, and I know this is all a review for you all. I'm just going to go through it quickly. So we felt it very important, the committee felt it crucial that this be a 2-pronged funding source. One, the bond for large projects, infrastructure, and one for the utility for maintenance and operations, and to address water quality issues and mandates that have come upon us. So it took a long process because we realized that we needed a long education. We all needed to be on the same page. We needed to understand the situation fully at the same level before we could then talk about how it should be funded and what the best options are. So that's why we're still here, or that's why we met for 10 months and then we're still here. So again, 2-pronged, the bond and the utility, we felt it crucial that both happened. I think you have a paper, and he'll speak a little bit to it. Chris Moxley, one of our committee members, there were so many things that we discussed that I know you all have discussed amongst yourselves at one time or another about credits and fairness and equity and how can we pay for what we need and keep fees low enough. I mean, I could go on for days, but we put forward 3 options to you all, and you all have, as of last time I saw you, narrowed it down to one of the utility options, which was the tiered fee that we put forward. So we wanted to give you all options. We didn't just want to put a flat fee forward and say, here's 2 flat fees, pick one of them. We felt like you needed another option, and that's why you have the tiered fee as well. This chart, really quickly, I know you all have seen it before. The tiered fee option that has been proposed, these pie charts here show the impervious area in town and what non-residential and residential make up, and the funding model that we're proposing of how much residential and non-residential would make up of the funding of the tiered option. Over here, what you have, and these are all, I know it says large apartment complex, fast food restaurant, those are all actual addresses in Norman. We just took those off for privacy's sake. So these quotes are based on actual properties in Norman. And if you look, you'll see the utility per month added to the bond per month. And that would be the total per month that you see on the far. So it's not insignificant what we're asking our citizens to vote for and support when you think about the two across the board. It is not insignificant at all. We acknowledge that. But I really wanted you to see that last tier, that total number. If both should pass, that would be the impact on our residents and our business owners and our citizens. And those two together, taken into consideration, was how we came to the tiered structure that you all are discussing right now. So I think you know all that. I wanted to touch on it. Once we presented it to you all, we began doing our due diligence and education program that we've been working on since March, are still working on. We have had 4 surveys across that time. We've done focus groups with rural, urban, and businesses, small business and large businesses. We have had 6 open houses. We were told we should have 2. We had 6. We got a lot of really great feedback that we have presented to you all from all of those initiatives. And we also attended board meetings. I went to every single ward. So thank you all for having them and for inviting us and getting on the spot and participating in it with us. So we've also been at board meetings, and if anybody wants to talk about stormwater, I'll talk about it to anybody. So, and I have been talking about it to a lot of people outside of this arena. So I would also say this type of education initiative, to my knowledge, to my immediate knowledge, this city has never undertaken such an education initiative on any type of initiative that may go forward onto a ballot, and to get feedback from the residents. This is pretty groundbreaking. You all supported us in helping us hire a communications firm. They're going to speak to us in a little bit. They're visiting us tonight. And we use that information and we use their help to go out and talk to residents. So we have momentum building. We've been talking about it for a long time, and we feel like the time has come. And so hopefully tonight we'll have a fruitful discussion and some decisions, or close to decisions, can be made. But the education, I think, is unsurpassed by any other initiative in this town before anything's even final, right? There's a lot more education to do should something become final. And we will all keep our noses to the ground and keep working really hard to get that education to the voters, because we're going to bring in a whole new pool of people who weren't really paying attention. But now that they may vote on it and it might affect their pocketbook, they're going to engage. And that's great. We want that. And we look forward to that. So it's kind of a different phase of education that's coming our way, and it's going to be a whole lot more people, which I think is great. So thank you. Thank you for the joint meeting. I hope we have a great discussion tonight. And I think Anthony was going to speak next, correct? Karen?
Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Anthony Francisco, the city's finance director. And I was asked to talk just a little bit about this question that's floating around out there about why do you need a stormwater utility fee? Why not just pay for it out of the general fund? Since the general fund is going to have this money coming in from the University of North Park TIF, whenever you stop apportioning sales tax from the general fund to the TIF fund. Now, I apologize because I have been knee-deep preparing for the council's mid-year budget review, so I'm just going to give you a couple of excerpts, and I always have trouble with that word, from that presentation, but I hope that it will address that question. As you know, the proposal from the Citizens Committee that is moving forward through the council process would raise about an additional, and I'm using rounded figures here, but about an additional $4 million toward stormwater expenses. And these are the ongoing expenses separate and apart from the capital projects that will be addressed through the general obligation bond proposal. In order to meet the mandates that we have already from the Environmental Protection Agency, we know that we need to be spending about $7 million a year for stormwater-related things. Currently, the general fund is spending about $3 million a year on stormwater-related things. So the committee's proposal is that the general fund would continue to spend that $3 million, and the $4 million or so gap would be made up from the stormwater utility fee. But what if you had $4 million a year coming into the general fund from the TIF apportionment of sales tax? So what we were presenting to the Council's Finance Committee just a moment ago was talking about what if, and this is not current policy, but what if we stopped apportioning sales tax to the University of North Park TIF? So that first page makes that assumption. The first page in column C, which is the current fiscal year that we are in, you see that we're projecting about $41 million in sales tax coming into the general fund. In column D, next fiscal year, we're making an assumption that there'll be growth as we project going all along, but that $3.5 to $4 million of apportioned sales tax, instead of going to the TIF fund, would go to the general fund. And that is in column D on line 4 in your handout. So now we would have about $46 million worth of sales tax revenue in the general fund, and that would be an ongoing revenue source. That is a major step in a positive direction from our standpoint of trying to address the general fund's ongoing concern of expenditures being greater than ongoing revenues. So this is a positive, and you see that the bottom line in the general fund on line 63 is positive in that picture. We are in fiscal year 20, revenues would exceed expenditures by about $2.5 million. Now, our expenditures continue to grow faster than our revenues, so that positive picture declines over time. But we would still have adequate fund balance throughout this 5-year period, and we would end that 5-year period with the general fund balance of about $13.5 million. Beautiful, from, Anthony, the guardian of the general fund. That's a very positive sign. But, Anthony, the Chicken Little also has to always point out the realities and things that are currently stressing the general fund and things that we know about that are coming in the future that the general fund is going to have to provide for. So on the next page, we have built in the expenditures from the public safety sales tax operations. The public safety sales tax was passed by the voters a few years ago, and it mandated the addition of a lot of personnel, particularly police officers and firefighters and support personnel like dispatchers, to be added to the city's workforce. The problem is that the sales tax that was passed to pay for that, just like all of our other sales tax-based funds, the expenditures are growing faster than the revenues. So the public safety sales tax also has a negative net difference picture going forward and currently. To the extent that, under the current circumstances, the public safety sales tax will go into a negative fund balance position next fiscal year. The budget that the council is going to be considering 2 months from now. In its current state, the public safety sales tax fund cannot operate anymore. Under the public safety sales tax ordinance, once all of these capital expenditures that were mandated from the public safety sales tax have been completed, those operations go into the general fund. So what this page is showing you is those public safety sales tax operations being built into the general fund now with the additional revenue that is coming in from the ending of the apportionment of sales tax from the general fund to the University of North Park TIF fund. And you see that now that rosy picture that we saw a moment ago is not so rosy. We can continue to meet those expenditures, okay? We're okay. But instead of ending the 5-year period with a $13 million positive fund balance, all other things being equal, now we would end that 5-year period with a negative fund balance, okay? So we continue to have this addressing of this long-term problem of our expenditures outstripping our revenues in the general fund to do what we are already obligated to do. The problem that confronts the stormwater picture here then is that there's no money available to additionally address stormwater concerns out of the general fund. The committee has made the assumption that the general fund will continue to contribute about $3 million towards stormwater concerns, but we know that those costs are going to increase in the future. So my point to you would be that the general fund is not going to be positioned to substitute for a stormwater utility and is not going to be well positioned in the future to pick up the rising costs of meeting the mandated stormwater costs that we know are going to increase in the future. And that's all my story. Any questions? I'm sorry, I can't give you rosy pictures without some gloom and doom.
Thank you, Jim Reaper. Tell me what makes you feel
Councilmember
good.
Castleberry.
Anthony, in these worksheets here, we currently have some PSST positions that were voted on in the ballot that have not been funded yet. Those are not in here.
Those are not in here, no.
So that additional cost we're obligated to do, we're going to do.
Yes, sir.
Are not.
And that worsens this picture a little bit.
Do you have an idea about how much that is?
Just for the SRO program, it's on the scale of $300,000 a year, and that is with the assumption that the school district is paying for half of those school resource officer costs.
And then we still have some dispatchers and mechanics and so those positions. Do you have an idea about what that would be?
That's going to be on the scale of about $200,000 in addition, once all of those positions are
So in these out years, I need to add another about $500,000
per year. Yes, sir.
in here. Thanks for the good news.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, I think now we have representative of the pond.
So our next presenter is Ryan Orendorff, and I said that correct, did I say that? Okay. He is a representative from Han Public, who is a communication firm that the city contracted with about a year ago now, or close to a year ago, to help us with an education plan and a communication plan. So he is here to answer any questions you have and talk to us for a little bit about several different aspects regarding this.
Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. Thank you all for having me tonight. I want to commend the Citizens Committee, the council, mayor and staff on all the work you've done so far to date on this initiative. But I'm here to talk to you about the work you still have to do. So what the next few months could look like in terms of positioning any sort of ballot initiatives for the best success possible. The second thing I have to share is an idea for a concept about how the city could continue its education efforts on a ballot initiative that would include a transportation bond, stormwater bond, and a stormwater utility, sort of a visionary bond package. Before I get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about our approach. So when the City of Norman brought us on to help with this, one of our first recommendations was throughout this process to follow something called the Bleicher model. This comes from Hans and Anne-Marie Bleicher, two people that are experts in public outreach. And their area of expertise has to do with getting difficult public projects implemented. So they study contentious issues in cities across the country, and they've figured out that there's a pattern to the ones that succeed. And the pattern here has 4 steps to it. The first is when you're talking to the public about the issue, you're very straightforward that this is a serious problem that needs to be addressed. And I think everyone in the room here knows that, has acknowledged that, and is here tonight because of that. So you've done a good job with this step. The second step is to let people know that you, as the elected officials, as the leaders of the community, it's your duty to help solve this problem. In fact, it'd be irresponsible for you to ignore it and to not try to help solve it. So again, this is why you're here tonight. You're giving up your free time on a Thursday evening to really try to push this forward and make it work. Step 3 is convincing people or sharing with people that your response is sensible, reasonable, and responsible. So the plan that you've come up with to solve the problem is never going to make everyone happy, but it's a responsible plan that's sensible and reasonable and going to help us solve this problem. Finally, the last step, and I think the committee did an excellent job of this over the last 9 months in some of their outreach, staff and council as well, is letting citizens know that you're listening and you really do care. So all of the open houses that were put on earlier in the year, all of the research that we've done to gain citizen feedback to get to this point is important for step 4. So you've followed this plan well to this point, and you need to continue to do that in the next 2 months. Showing people that this problem still exists, you're serious about solving it, that the solutions that you've worked together to come up with are sensible, reasonable, and responsible, and that you're listening to the community and that you care. So that's the background. Let's talk about next steps. So between now and April 2nd, what are the things you need to do to make this effort as successful as it can be? First, I think you really need to convey a united show of support. And that means that the council, the mayor, the staff, the Stormwater Citizen Committee, when you come to your final decision, you all unite around that and show support for it. So that could be done through a joint statement that members sign off on, an opinion editorial you write for the Norman transcript, and also making sure that you're all telling the same story. Your messaging is consistent and you're all together on this effort. I think if you want the citizenry to get behind this and support these initiatives, you all have to be united and supportive of them as well. So if you want the citizenship to follow your lead, you have to be together on that. Yes.
Would that include a unanimous vote of the council and mayor to send this question forward?
I mean, in a perfect world, a unanimous vote would be wonderful. I would say as much support as you've got for it would be excellent.
What would be the deleterious effects of a vote that was not unanimous?
I can't say specifically what that is. All I can tell you is the more supportive you are, the more together you are on this, the better you're going to be in the future. Okay, step 1 is a united show of support. Step 2 is continued community outreach and education. And Amanda pointed to this earlier in her presentation. You've done a lot to this point, but there's still a lot of work to be done over the next few months to make this work. So that may mean more open houses to talk not about input on options, but to talk about the final plan that you've come up with. Educate citizens, take questions, that sort of thing. It may mean more ward meetings for council members. It could be a speakers bureau where you're attending existing community events and meetings to talk about the solution and why it's right for the city. Also, on a staff level, you want to utilize your city Facebook account and any other mediums at your disposal to continue to educate citizens. And doing local media outreach to tell the story of why stormwater and transportation are such pressing issues in Norman and what the initiatives on the ballot would include. As a part of this, I think you need a theme for the education efforts that can tie the 3 things that may be on the ballot together. So we've come up with a concept here that could look something like this. It's called Vision for Norman. We've seen other cities react well to visionary leadership from mayor and council. So if you can unite and show the people of Norman that their community is going to be better after these bond initiatives are implemented, you'll be in better shape. So the way we've designed this is the words "for Norman" really jump out at you to remind people why you're doing this. You all love the place you live, and you're here to try to make it better. And then our tagline at the bottom, "Our roads, our water, our future," reminds us that we're all in this together. These are all resources we share, and we're doing this ultimately for the future. We want to make the city an even better place to live. So it's a simple way to summarize the 3 things that may be on the ballot. Then you take that theme and use it in all of your outreach over the next few months, whether it's electronic outreach you're doing on your Facebook page or in-person outreach like a handout or a brochure. Finally, step 3 is an external advocacy group. And these are a group of people beyond staff and council who come from all parts of the community who can come together and run a separate external campaign to tell voters to support this initiative. So you need a group of people who can lead this. I would imagine this group going around and collecting letters of support from people across the community, whether that's local opinion leaders, business leaders, environmental groups, neighborhoods and neighborhood associations. People need to see a broad display of support for this to help it along its way. This group may need to do some fundraising for advertising efforts. They want to develop traditional campaign materials like yard signs, mailers, ads, and handouts, and maybe even leverage some volunteer support. People who can walk the streets, talk to their neighbors, make calls on behalf of these initiatives. Again, this is something outside of the city's purview. Your job is to educate people. This would be a separate external advocacy group, but I think it's a very important part of a successful campaign. So just to summarize what we talked about, in order to position yourselves for success, we recommend you do these things. In terms of the Blighter model, again, you want to make people aware that there's a real problem, that you're qualified and ready to help solve it, that you do listen and you do care, and your final approach is responsible, reasonable, and sensible. Coming together as a group is very important. A united show of support can help rally the citizens around this. Education and outreach needs to continue with haste in the next few months, and an external advocacy group could help as well. So that's the extent of what I have to talk to you about. Does anybody have any
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Councilmember Bierman.
So as you probably saw the recent survey that we did, and what are your thoughts on that? Do you anticipate we'd be able to win over any of the 46% that responded no, they would not support a utility?
I think the most recent survey highlights the same thing we've seen throughout this initiative, is that the utility is going to be the toughest part of this for you all. I do think some of the discussions you may have later about ways to adapt what's on the table now just slightly may help you get some support. But I can't tell you for sure what the outcome will be. I think if you can commit to following these 3 steps, really come together as a group, really put some energy behind this, you'll be able to put your best foot forward on it.
So I guess I guess I'll rephrase. In your experience, is it easier or more likely to convert no votes to yes votes, or to simply try and bring out as many of the yes and convert some of the undecideds?
I think yes and undecideds is easier than converting a no vote. Not impossible to convert a no vote, but you want to find your best chance for success, and those are the 2 groups that I think you would look to.
Thanks.
Yes. Councilmember Clark.
I would point out with that survey, I've got a lot of feedback from our residents that they selected no because they thought like, well, they're not even giving us an option to which one, so I'm just gonna vote no all the way around, and so I don't think we can completely rely on 46%. And we had how many pages of feedback?
There was 100 pages of feedback just on one of the last comments.
And so I did my best to read all of them, and I was still amazed to see people don't understand why we're voting on this.
Right.
That's like,
That was exactly right.
so we've got a lot of work to do with that, but I mean, it shows that they don't understand why we're even voting on it. I think we can educate people, as we've seen, be successful in the ward meetings and in the open houses.
Yes. Bill.
A discussion in council and in the paper for that matter, and at some of the open houses that we did related to things external to stormwater, such as the senior center and other things that are on the plate. And we've heard people say, and I've heard people say, well, don't talk to me about stormwater, I want that senior center, or I want that swimming facility, or whatever. I know that there are solutions at hand, but to what extent does the focus on that interfere with our stormwater message, in your particular opinion?
It certainly can be on people's minds. I think if you were to make a decision in the next few days about the final ballot initiatives, those things get pushed to the forefront because that's what's being talked about right now.
I guess it's my humble opinion that stormwater is not going to push the senior center off the table at all. It's something that needs to be resolved.
And we will be talking about those at the next couple of council meetings.
But
so.
it's been part of the scenario all along.
And that is an excellent point, and we know that that's been a big thing, and I've heard a number of council members say we can't do this unless we've solved that problem. And we think that's very soon to be done, so I think we all want to make sure that has been addressed. The Aquatic Center, Columbia Sports Center, and the Senior Citizens.
And then the message becomes, we solved this problem, now we have to tackle this other, and we need your help.
There you go. You'll be our out-front guy.
Let me tell you about street sweepers.
Okay, other comments? Good, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Bill.
I don't have your memo here, but the last council meeting, we received a memo from you guys and changed your recommendation on the fee.
I think if you can do the things that I've outlined here, and you can make some slight amendments to the utility structure, which we'll be talking about later, that make them more favorable, it's worth going for.
Do you have any data to back up that statement about changing the changes to the structure would make it more favorable?
No data.
Did you make your prior recommendation based on data?
Did, but we only had one survey question to look at, and the question addressed the 369 structure, and that was it. Ideally, we'd like to see several data points. It was tough to make that recommendation, I'll be honest with you. But I think if you all can do these three things, can amend the utility fee structure, or talk about that in a way that you think will make it favorable, it's worth taking a shot at.
Councilmember.
So I've got a question for you, Mayor. Remind me, the process in terms of what the city's able to do is just to educate, correct?
Right, we can just educate. We need, if you're gonna do a full-blown campaign, then you have to get groups or a group of people that will help you do that campaign. We're limited to educating.
So when you're talking about an external advocacy group, that's something beyond the scope of the city council.
Yes.
And so I think we need to get a feel for our ability, or I think the city needs to have a feel for whether or not it's going to have advocacy groups that are willing to reach out, raise money, hire, this is hiring a professional firm is what you're advocating, correct? I mean, is that the best scenario? I mean, how?
Could be, but not
just people putting up
necessarily.
signs and, I mean, there are levels to this. I mean, is
Yeah.
it, what's the best case scenario for an external advocacy group? What does that mean? What would you say was the best solution for that?
I think the best case scenario is you have someone on board who has experience doing a campaign like that and who's very organized and can move quickly to put this together and get it out into the community.
I mean, I have a little, in a former life, I was a private citizen and an advocate for a new animal shelter, and we did exactly that. We went out and we hired a professional firm. We created a budget of $30,000 in that circumstance. We raised the money and we implemented our plan, and it passed. And so you're thinking that something like on that scale or grander would be what would be necessary to do something like this, especially when we're in a situation where it's a controversial subject.
I think you need a show of external support for what you're putting forth.
So
Ideally, you'd have internal support from staff, council, the committee here, and external support from this advocacy group.
So let me add that my understanding is that every single big bond issue that we've done, PSST, transportation, of course, Norman Forward that had an already existing citizen group, everything that we voted on, the water rate increase, everything we voted on, there's always been a citizen group, not the committee, but a citizen group that has been enlisted to help to promote it.
Is this the proper time to ask your thoughts on whether or not you feel like there's that out there right now for us to?
Well, I've talked to some environmental groups. I've talked to some church groups that are like the Green Team groups. I have talked to some council people or some chamber people.
I'll volunteer.
You'll volunteer.
But it seems to be external.
Right. The issue is that the council has to stand up first and say, we're willing to support this. How are you going to get complete buy-in from an external group until the council has stood up and said, okay, this is what we're going to back. We've got the Citizens Committee recommendations. We know why we need it. We've got budgetary problems. This is critical. We've got some help to start with education. And that's how you go out and get people to support you. I think that's really, yes.
And it relates to the committee's role going forward. I think that we do have a role in terms of the education, but I think that, and maybe the lawyer needs to step in here, but I think that proscribes our involvement with the externals that may come to that. We can't be on both sides of the fence.
Sure. You would be working with the external group?
Well, that's the question I'm asking.
You could do that.
I could do it as an individual, but not a representative of the committee or the city.
I think the issue is, historically, there's statutory language on the books that discourages the use of public funds for election propaganda or promotion. There are cases that limit that somewhat to initiatives that come through the initiative and referendum process. But how it's been interpreted up to now is taking the conservative approach and saying, we're not going to spend city money on that. But these external groups can spend money. You all can work with those groups.
That's what I'm.
Council can work with those groups. City staff
I
cannot be
think we
spending.
can donate money to those groups.
Indeed,
City
but
staff cannot be spending employee
I'm worried
time.
about the public face. And I understand the money part, but I can donate to whatever I please privately.
Right.
But I'm also, by virtue of this movie and other things, I'm a public face of this.
And it wouldn't be expenditure of public funds.
Okay, so as long as I'm representing myself as an individual.
And we're not paying you to do that.
Then you're not elected.
And you've already said in the video, I mean, you support this, so
But
that's no
educa-
secret.
I know, but that's an education thing.
Well, but there's an opinion and then there's education. The education is
I just
giving
don't
people the
wanna-
facts of the ballot
I
language.
just don't want to step in some brown squishy stuff.
I totally understand.
Well, I mean, if you don't feel comfortable, and
You don't have
that's
to.
going to be up to the committee, but if a committee member wants to be part of a larger citizen campaign, certainly they're welcome to do that.
Felt I needed to clarify that at this point.
Yeah, I
Certainly,
think that's a good,
from an
I think that's a
education
good
standpoint,
question.
I'm all in.
Right, good, that's a good question.
I'm all in too. I'll join the same activist committee as a councilperson because we've seen where our budget is going. We've all heard the stories. What are we waiting for?
Yeah, I'm
So we're agreed, Ward 6.
This is Ward 6 right here on the committee and me. Ward 6 is definitely.
Ward 8 is in too, we got Ward 8 down there.
Okay.
We're in.
So I hear some enthusiasm. How about now? Thank you very much for the presentation. If there's no more questions, now we're going to go back to Councilmember Wilson when we discussed the tiered structure before, advocating for her ward, which has a lot of rural area, and has heard this issues from her. And I think this is part of what we're looking at is this is a group that we've had a really difficult time explaining why this is a good idea and why it would be important for them to be part of it. So this was a suggestion, and Carrie took it and ran with it and has a recommendation.
Thank you, Carrie, by the way.
Absolutely, you're very welcome.
She also came to a Ward 5 meeting, and so did Amanda and Aaron.
And we enjoyed it
Last
very
weekend,
much.
yeah.
It was a great group of people. So as you know, at the last meeting, I didn't print that, sorry. And I'm sorry, I did not bring printed slides on this one, so we'll have to go with what we have here. If you make a printed copy, we can get some. Raise your hand if you want some. Michelle will go get some for us. Yeah, go ahead and print some for us, Michelle.
We'll take a picture.
So, Councilmember Wilson requested that we look at A1, A2 zoned residential properties for the potential for an agricultural tier. And so, it took a little while, and I got to love a spreadsheet with over 3,000 parcels on it. It was great. I know a lot now about A1, A2, and it's not just in Ward 5 either, so just so that you know. We focused on residential properties, so there are 2,853, give or take a couple that didn't have data points for me to include in our conversation today. And discussions with Catherine, we really think that instead of going with a separate tier, because then we change our basis for how we're assessing a stormwater utility fee, we go with a credit. Because then all residential properties would still fall under the proposed tier structure, 369, based on their living area. But only those properties that meet the set criteria, and I'm throwing out an idea for a name. I'm proposing that we call it the green space credit. Only those folks that meet the specific criteria that you set for the green space credit would receive it. And that way, we're not changing our basis of calculations. We're still following what the committee recommended. They did in their recommendations, say that it was up to the council to decide whether or not they wanted to give credits or not. The committee felt like if the administrative cost would be really high on the credits, that it may not be worth it, but this may be an alternative that we can do without a lot of administrative costs to it. I've already done the work, yeah, that's right. So you have an idea of where the distribution of A1, A2 parcels are. There are any of these colored parcels across there. And the colors relate to the tiers, right? So this particular color, this orangey color, is tier 3, the $9 rate. This yellow color right here, that is the second tier, which is the $6 rate. And then every once in a while, and out here in particular, you can see this kind of light color right there. That's tier 1. That's the lowest tier at $3. So you can see it's all over, right? It's all over the city, except Ward 4 and Ward 2. Two's got a little dot down there. One little one kind of snuck in there.
Spent 2 hours at that farm in Ward 7.
So you can see it's kind of all over the place. So just to give you some background on what are we looking at, right? So when we look at the current residential rate structure, total number of parcels, it represents, this A1, A2 represents 7% of the total parcels in Normandy, about 40,000 parcels that we have. When you break it down into tiers, how many are in what? You have 534 parcels in Tier 1, 1,284 in Tier 2, and 1,035 in Tier 3. And then, just assuming that all of these pay the current proposed rate with no credits, the total annual revenue generated by these parcels is projected at $224,000 a year. So you can see, even if you do a 50% credit, we're only reducing the amount generated by about $112,000 for the year. And I've got some percentages. You know I love data, so we'll talk about some percentages here in a minute. So the proposal is to establish a green space credit. I proposed at 50%, and that may be too high. We'll let you guys discuss that. But the reason I did that, Councilmember Wilson, in her discussions last week, threw out $2. So if you take 50% from each of those, you're averaging about $2. You know, it's you get, it'd be $1.50, $3, $4.50, right? So you're in there. 50% credit, funding reduced by $112,000, 1.5% of the $7.3 million. Well, you know, I'm never happy to lose any funding because it's vitally needed for my program. You know, it's a small percentage, right? We can live with that. We can make it work. And here's the specific criteria that I think the property owner would have to meet in order to qualify for this credit. Their property would have to be zoned A1 or A2, and then it would have to have a determined percentage of green space, and I'm going to let you guys decide. I've got my preferences between either 90 or 99% based on a ratio of that first floor living area to parcel size. So we're using the same metrics to calculate this green space percentage as we're using to calculate the fee. And then I put some numbers down here so you can see how many of the total 2,853 this affects. So the lower your green space credit, right, if you go to 90% and above, you get almost all of those. I will tell you the ones that it doesn't get, there's a little section on River Cross Court where they are less than half-acre lots, and they're still zoned A2. So kind of odd, but they're very high. Well, they're very low green space percentages if you look at it at 90, 99%, right? They're in the more the 50% range. Councilmember Scott.
For meeting the criteria, does it need to be one or the other, or both?
So what I would propose is that it has to meet both.
So whichever tier, or like 90, 95, 99 would choose.
Right, so whichever one of these you choose, plus this,
okay,
they would have to meet that in order to qualify for the green space credit, as I'm envisioning. But if you have a different idea, I've got numbers and things, we can talk about that.
Councilmember Bowman.
Would we be able to, before an April 2nd vote, would we be able to have a way for people that might be affected by this credit to check and see if they fall in the 90%, 95, 99%?
I have those numbers now.
So somebody can just call up here and say, I'm at 1432.
Yeah, I can give them that information.
Carrie, I think instead of me calling on people,
Are
since
you okay
I
with me?
can't see everybody, and I keep missing Councilmember Hickman back here, so I think he was next, but I think if you call on him, it'll be better because you can see everybody.
Okay, I didn't want to overstep. Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Hickman.
What's the smallest lot of parcel size for those parcels that you're looking at that are zoned A1 or A2?
The smallest lot?
Can you recall approximately?
The half acre size is about the smallest lot that I remember seeing.
That should be qualified those are grandfathered in the old ones. Go ahead.
Do we have other zone types of property, RE, R1, R3, whatever, that have similarly sized parcel sizes as those that we see in A1 or A2, like the half acre? Or
So
the half whatever it
there
is?
are, in my understanding, and I think I'll probably let Terry help me out a little bit with some of the zoning questions. Rural estates have larger acreages. Are they up to
I think they're about 2.5.
2.5?
So why wouldn't we
So-
include those other potential, why would we limit it to just A1 or A2 if we're doing it based on the green space, if we have other types of zoned properties that could qualify?
And that's a good question, and that's up for discussion. Councilmember Wilson?
I can tell you why I suggested it that way, and that's because a lot of those neighborhoods that have those smaller lots also have man-made infrastructures. So they do actually kind of go into the,
But if it's a green space credit based on
well, I think they would be
stormwater,
get kicked out though by your second qualifier there.
Yeah, and I would say my recommendation is that we go to the 99%, because when you look at that calculation, if you're at 99% or greater, generally those are 10-acre sized lots with a standard size house. So very few of the 5-acre properties, there are a couple, but very few of them actually would meet this 99% with the living area calculation.
But a clear majority still qualifies, right? 2,500 of 2,800 would still qualify.
Right. Councilmember Carter?
So Carrie, here's my fear, is that this becomes complicated. You know, everybody, I'm a large animal veterinarian, I got tons of clients in A1, A2. I hear from it all day long. And this will be very simple. Went over it today with a customer and wondering about something like this. I didn't know you were working on it. I'm happy. But it'll be simple. If she's A1 or A2, she qualifies. If we have that second guard there, then she's got to go. I can't just answer her question. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I can't just say, well, are you A1? Everybody knows if they're A1 or A2, but they don't know if they're 90% of their green space with their house ratio, blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden they start fogging up and they just brown out and they don't know.
So let me tell you one of the ways that we can make this work, right? Because we have that list, we have the calculation. All we would have to do, should this pass, should you decide to implement this, is at the beginning send them a letter to say, you qualify for this credit, we have calculated your green space as this percentage, fill out this form if you would like, and we will put that in our system. That's a way I think we could reduce the administrative cost and the confusion a bit on that.
Gary, you're calling on people.
The only thing I see about that is that's kind of after the fact. I mean, I get this letter, oh, well, hell, if I known that, I would have voted for it. I mean, I think if we're going to do that, we're going to have to do that before the vote, to let people know.
And it could be possible that we're working right now, considering a map with the tiers, so you can easily access it, put in your address, and figure out what tier you're in. We can easily add a side note to it. I say easily, I'm just committing Joyce to something that I haven't really talked to her about. Sorry about that. But just, we can add that note in there to say, this parcel qualifies for the green space credit, and go from there. Because, you know, like we talked about, we want to have all of the forms, all of the processes done ahead of time. So we want to have the appeals process ready. That just means if you move forward with this, I've got another policy, yay, and a form to create so that it's ready before the election.
But she's already identified all the parcels. That work got done between last week and this week,
That is
which was
amazing.
astronomical.
So impressed.
That's all.
Comment about, if we're going to go these ratios of green space, I don't think it should matter what you're zoned.
Yeah, that's the problem. That's what you're going to get some pushback on that.
If I've got, if I'm zoned commercial, but I got 100 acres, but I've got, just my zoning should have nothing to do with my runoff. That's how I use the property. That's not the runoff I create. So if we've got these percentages of green space, I don't think the zoning should matter.
And I was just following
would that add
from the last
Would that add
conversation.
more parcels to your deal?
Yeah, it would, I would imagine it would. I don't know how many, and because we really also did not look at the non-residential side at all. We focused because of the request on the residential side. But it would be another exercise to look if you were really concerned about that on how many that would actually be. It would be a bigger endeavor, but it might be possible. Councilmember Scott?
I'm actually thinking in the opposite direction. So what if we removed criteria B and worked with just meeting that first criteria? Does that change the funding that is reduced at all?
It's just half that number.
No, it's really just this number.
So
That
it would just be-
112,000
So what
is
do
out
we
of
need to
all of
think
the
about? And that way it
A1A2.
eliminates this question of adding in residential and other people getting jealous that they have all this green space or whatever. So what if we were to just work with A1, A2?
And that's a possibility. That's up for council to discuss. We just have to then come up with what is that credit going to be called.
Do we have a legal problem with that?
Well, that's what I was motioning to carry forward.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I wasn't. A lot of hands. So we've been doing some research in our office about classifications and rate structures. It's very common to see classifications in rate structures based on zoning, because that gives you some indication of the use, and that's common. And courts will look at those and they will okay them, but you have to be able to show some substantial difference as the grounds for creating the distinction. And so zoning category makes some sense. Here, these were all parcels that are residential. They're the same as far as use goes, they're the same as R1 zoning. And so this credit is an attempt to make this more defensible, so that we are not just looking at a zoning that has the same use as single-family residential. We're looking at another criteria to establish that substantial difference required by the courts.
So wouldn't the way the city of Norman does their zoning of A1 and A2 at this point has to be more than 10 acres? Wouldn't that automatically make it different than an R1?
In most cases, yes. We do have some parcels, I think, where we have very, very large houses. And so that offset may not be as much as it would be with a 1,500 square foot house or something. So.
And I've got some example properties too here in a little bit to kind of show you the range and kind of why I kind of landed on the 99% as the criteria. I think Brett had a hand up on that.
One of our very first meetings of the committee was we have to get something to pass. And one of the biggest things that we heard the first time in the failure of the bond issue was, it's too complicated. How do I figure how much I owe? I think I follow in step with the council woman here, that make it simple. It's A1 or A2, that's the credit.
And you could call it an ag credit then, I think.
You can call it an A1, A2 credit.
Or if you called it ag, you would stick with
I like that.
not green, because then it'd be like, well, I have green in my house.
Because my house sits on 2.5 acres, and I qualified for every bit of that.
Except for the ag.
Except for the ag. Yeah. So why would I not argue that point?
I just wanted to say that when we as a committee went through untold amounts of different options like this, green credits, this credit, that credit, do we maintain our own lake? And I've heard these at meetings, I've heard these around town, I've heard these in the committee. We have our own detention pond, we should give it credit. We have underground detention when we built our building, we should give it credit. So that's how we arrived at where we arrived at. Because when you start doing all these special interest things, and I appreciate you looking out for your district, for your ward, but I'm gonna start looking out for my neighborhood now. If that's where we're gonna go, I'm gonna go, I want a credit for my lake in my neighborhood. My neighbor has rain barrels, we need credit for that. My whole point in writing this right here, there's 30 different things that affect stormwater that I could come up with, mainly from Carrie, we've educated on this for months before we got into all this, so we would know what we were talking about. And at this point, to start throwing in special interest, to me, is a recipe for this to go down. So that's my opinion on it.
Councilmember Holman.
I guess my thoughts would be that agricultural land or zoning is generally less intensive as far as an urban environment than commercial and residential. I would note too that things like detention ponds don't help with pollution, really. Having more green space and less concrete is really the best thing for pollution reduction. So I don't know that these neighborhoods having detention ponds is helping with the pollution reduction issue. It's just storing water, but that water is still coming at a rapid rate when it leaves those detention ponds. So I think I do agree, though. I didn't really want to get into credits and giving special treatment to any certain groups in town, but the agricultural one does make sense to me based on the history of this issue and what I've heard from folks about their potential to support a plan or not. So I'm willing to support this if this is something we think can get this thing through.
Councilmember Wilson and then Councilmember Clark.
Well, I answered all these questions, and I think these are valid. I did. I went through this and I'm like, no. I would actually point out that speaking for my rural sections, that we don't generally water our lawns or use fertilizers or even insecticide pesticides, or we're way greener out there, I think. And I think that we hold a natural riparian zone for the city. We hold cross timbers. We have prairies and things that are important to the city, and we do that at our expense a lot of times because we have to maintain a one house to 10 acres. We're not allowed to sell off that 10 acres. We're not allowed to do anything out there past 48th Street, and we also don't get a lot of the services that the city has to offer, even though we don't pay for them either, but we don't have the option to get them. Even things that are essential like fire hydrants and response times to police and fire and things like that. So I would say that if you want to shake that down, a lot of times the rural folks get way less in the end. And I do think that they're very in tune to this issue, and I think that from the conversations I've had and the polling I've done, that a nod to the fact that they're maintaining rich green spaces actually makes them feel better about what's happening in the city of Norman, and I think we would scoop up a bigger amount of voters in that.
So is there scientific evidence that a 2,000 square foot house on 10 acres produces less stormwater than a 2,000 square foot house on a quarter acre?
Yes.
Is there? I'm asking a scientist here.
Well, so what you have to look at is where does the runoff go, right? And does it have a chance to soak in where it's at, right? Where you have the larger parcels, more area for that runoff to soak in, as long as it's directed to the open areas, right? Then there's potential, there's more area for it to soak in, right? But on the quarter acre, there's not as much. And if it's graded to drain to the street, then it's draining to the infrastructure faster than it is soaking into the ground. So there is a little bit of justification on there. But I want to get to some of these examples too, because for every one house on 10 acres that you can point out, there are a couple of interesting cases that I ran across as I was going through this.
Councilman Clark.
Yes.
So one more comment that will lead into that. So obviously, Councilmember Wilson in Ward 5 has a vast majority of the agricultural property, but Ward 3 and Ward 6 also have a fair amount. So it's not a Ward 5 issue, it's a Norman issue. I would argue that agriculture or rural Norman is not a special interest. It is the character of who we are as a community, and if any community should have an ag credit, it's this one. So you have my full support on this, as you always have on this issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Scott.
I have a question for Sarita and then you guys. You know what percentage of Ward 5 votes?
Woo, what percentage of Ward 5 votes on
It depends
stormwater?
on-
67%.
So,
$3
I don't know. You don't know, like, can you give me a ballpark?
I would 35%.
In your last election, it was 35% and that wasn't stormwater. So let's say 35 to 45% maybe vote. What percentage of Ward 5 is zone A1 and A2?
That I did not look at.
I
know that there was-
I'm throwing these out here, so when we start our campaign, I'm wondering if when we target these voters, if we need to be sending them, you know, and if this could be dangerous, this is kind of a question for the gentleman from Han, but should we be sending these A1 and A2 residencies the information like, hey, we're voting on the stormwater, these are the benefits, you know, water quality, infrastructure, environmental, we need to keep up, but you get a discount or the ag credit because of your lot. So do you think that should we not send those types of things? Should we, because that's a piece of the education, right? If they just know that we're gonna have a stormwater and they don't know about the ag credit, they're gonna be more inclined to vote no. If they know that we are making an effort, do you think they'll be more inclined to vote yes?
I think you certainly want to make them aware that an ag credit is available if that becomes part of the package. And I think that's something that could be a benefit to agricultural folks, people who are zoned agricultural, and those who aren't too. I think this shows that you're listening to community feedback and trying to develop the strongest proposal possible. If there's a way for people to find out, yes, I would qualify for this, and you could share that information, that would also be helpful.
That's what I'm curious about, and that's why I'm wondering about what percentages are voting. And
Brett had wanted to add to that.
One of the first meetings that we had some stats from the previous the previous stormwater utility election of just quickly looking at this. Almost 2,200 people in Ward 5 voted no, to about 100 approximately that voted yes for it.
But this is my point. How much did it feel like? Because if I remember looking at that thing, if all 2,200 voted yes, it still didn't pass.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even.
Different issue, different structure.
Different
Totally get that.
structure.
But I'm just saying, if you convert every one of those people to a yes vote, and nobody else changes, it doesn't matter. I don't know if you can make that jump, because it was such a different type of thing, but that kind of your question. And you're not gonna convert them all, and you're gonna lose them. It's gonna change, but it was overwhelmingly. I mean, they had gravel driveways. I mean, it was bad.
I'd like to point out, when we started this thing, the idea was to keep it as simple as we could. Rule number one, impervious was off the table. Put a quarter in the jar every time you say that. So we tried to do something very simple, and we started out with just flat fee, $4.50, $5. Nobody's going to be upset with that. Hey, we're all in for that. And then we started looking at what needs to get done. Well, we weren't anywhere close to where we needed to be with flat fee. And that's one reason we took a little bit longer than we thought, because there's a lot of different layers to this. And I think it's very important that we keep in mind, are we gonna make everybody happy? No. But this is nothing like the previous vote. We are keeping this at a really scaled down version.
Simplistic version.
And trying to keep everything as fair as possible to everyone involved. And that was the intent going in, that's still our intent that we're trying to get.
I'll second Mike's motion, but I'll also call to mind, or to recollection, that particularly in Ward 5, the last time around, we talked about, well, how will this impervious fee affect us? And for Ward 5, it was because of gravel driveways and outbuildings and so on, it was going to be a significant charge, $80, $100 a month. And people objected to that. And what are you going to do about it? It came up in the sessions that we had to educate the population. And the answer was, well, we'll have a credit. Or tell me about the credit. Well, we'll figure it out. You know, we could not give an answer. It was so vaguely stated that it was doomed to fail, in my humble estimation. We did in our discussions try to keep it simple, as Mike said, and we did talk about credits and backed off because it seemed to complicate things. We would offend one constituency by trying to please another, and that remains the case. I would say that because in principle we were okay with credits, it's something that the council would develop at a later point in time. If the council is deciding tonight or next Tuesday that we're going to have a credit, if that's the way to pursue this, then we need to be specific. And people need to be able to get that question answered, not with a, we'll figure it out, but this is it. But I would again caution, let's keep it limited, let's keep it very well defined. And let's not stray too far from the 369 that's been in the paper so often that half the population's already educated that that's it.
Okay, let's let Carrie go on and show us some of the examples, because it's not as simple as, I mean, when we hear about these pastoral areas, it's not all like that.
So this is probably what you're thinking of, right? This is the zoned A2 property with 165 acres with 916 square feet of living area with a green space of 99.99%, right? Okay, they're tier 1, right? You can see where they're at. But remember, living area is just for the house. You can see a cluster of buildings there, right? Those are outbuildings that don't get factored in because of how we set up the residential tier. Okay, so that's the classic example, I think.
That's 165 acres.
Right, that's
$1.50 a month.
That's $1.50 a month.
What was that thing in the middle of that map back there? That
Pond.
big green thing?
The
Where
science
did
would
that
call
water
it
come
pond.
from?
It runs in.
It runs off.
Right.
It runs
So
off
is
the
the city of
pasture
Norman gonna do something there?
into.
What's the city of Norman gonna do to that?
There's a creek running all the way out from the road there. If there's no runoff out in rural Norman, how are we able to fill up lakes and ponds? And why are there creeks?
What are those people gonna get for their $1.50?
Why are there bridges?
They'll pay for that with those are capital projects.
Okay, so let's go to the next one, right? So here's another one, A2, 5 acres this time, much smaller property, larger living space, right? Larger living area at almost 2,000 square feet, which would just slightly, they barely get into tier 2. They are almost tier 3, 99% green space, because we're only looking at living area to parcel size. Okay, so there's a little bit of a factor there. Okay, next thing. A1, I wanted to throw an A1 in. You'll be surprised, there are not really that many A1. They're a little bit hard to find. 4.69 acres, 1,500 square feet. We're at 99.3% green space, given the current calculation method, tier 2. So they'd be paying $3. Okay. Then you have this one. A2 zoned, 2 acres, 7,306 square feet of just living area, right? But that doesn't include the pool house, and the other out structures. Tier 3, they'd be paying $4.50.
So it's paid $4.50 for.
$4.50.
Seems fair.
So, how many of those are there?
There's one next door to it too.
There are quite a few. Yeah, but I haven't looked at all of them. But this is why, again, 93% square of the green space. So that's why I thought 99% was better, because if you go to that, if you go anything less than 99%, you're running into situations like this, where their area to soak in stormwater is a lot more limited than you would think, given their zoning classification, right? So I wanted to bring that up as an example. These are the odd ones. There are going to be a few of them. They're probably more than you think, but that's where this percent really comes into play.
Might
It
be
keeps,
Would it be less than 3,000 properties?
that are like this.
That look like that?
Well, you
Yeah,
had a
it's
number,
less than 3,000, yes.
you had a number of tier threes.
Right, so when you
Couple
look
slides
at the comparison between the 99%, the number of properties at 99%, there are probably about 300 between the 99% and the 90% that are in some form or fashion like this. Councilmember Wilson.
So then it's fair to say, though, in your R1 areas, you also have properties that have similar situations. There's small lots with big houses and big lots with small houses, and you kind of scoop those up with your tiers, right?
So when you're looking at the tiers, right, because we're just looking at living area, we don't give a consideration to the parcel size. So there is a potential to have in these other zoning classifications, smaller houses on these bigger lots. We just don't know how many there are that are like that.
I guess my point is that while we are not, short of evaluating every property for its exact runoff, we are not getting that for what we're doing. And probably the best scenario of getting that was in our former proposal that died. And a lot, and I just want to reiterate that a lot of Ward 5 specifically was annexed in. The people did not ask to be in this city. And their family farms did not ask to be here. And I don't know how many of those farms are there. I don't know. But that's where you get the descent. And also, they're being asked to maintain one house to 10 acres in an effort to protect the watershed. But they're doing partly their part. I can't go sell my 20 acres and get $30,000 a half acre or anything like that. I can't. So, anyways.
So could I have a couple things to say, if you don't mind. But I'm looking at Michael and Rachel, who are the two Ward 5 constituents that were on the Citizen Committee. And this is something we have not had a chance to discuss as a committee because it popped up last week. What are your thoughts? If you want to share them. I'm not going to make you speak.
You want to go first?
Does this sway your vote?
Actually, the last thing I was thinking was, Sarita was talking about the 1 in 10 situation. What if you looked at it as 10 acres or greater as part of your criteria? And that would maybe alleviate, if I was on an RE, residential estates, I might be pissed off to be let, ignored.
I thought about, I mentioned that to Carrie about why we didn't do bigger lots, because I think my house would qualify for this, because mine's still agricultural, and I shouldn't get an agricultural credit. I mean, I'm not agricultural, just because that's how I'm zoned. And I take care of the big pond.
But your house, you have a bigger percentage of green space.
I do. I'm just saying, to me, the agricultural credit should be for something that's more agricultural.
Now we're getting really subjective on who's on.
I do want this.
Sorry.
My property actually is agricultural, and I would easily satisfy the 99% rule. So personally, it doesn't really matter to me. I think, though, that one point that's been made by several people in here is that our goal was to come up with something simple and something that would pass. And I think the fact that if you look at, Ward 5 is over 60% of the city geographically. And if you take the precincts from about 80th northeast out to 180th, almost, like 9 miles east and west. And it's like 10 miles, it's a lot of geographical area. If you take that land, they voted 95% no. And so I think that the benefit of something like this is it's gonna flip a few of those votes, some of those votes. And you're not gonna flip everybody. Still on the Ward 5 Facebook page, you have the naysayers, the grumblers who will never gonna vote for the hoax, for the stormwater tax and so forth. But I think the benefit of it is if it's kept really, really simple, and if it, could flip enough votes to make a difference in combination with the votes that have got to change in the urban area too.
Do you think adding this is going to dissuade anybody from voting? Will they not come and vote if you add this tier? And so then how many of your constituents do you think it might turn against or for? I mean, those are just rhetorical questions I'm asking you to think about. I think you might get some extra voters by adding this, or some extra yeses.
So in my very non-scientific, and I get that it was very anecdotal, Facebook poll, I said, here's the tier idea, here's what's being proposed. You're a no, nothing ever is going to happen, never going to vote for anything. And there was a large percentage of 244 people that voted. It was like 90. My biggest percentage of people that said they would vote for something was the ag. And it was 65 or something.
Well, the only way to keep it simple is just to do ag. I mean, that's the only way to keep it simple, and it almost seems like it might be more legally defensible if we say we're just doing that zoning. Because when we do anything else, I do think it's going to be a problem for some people that live in the areas with acreages. But the only thing I think that could be simple enough, and I think that is a huge issue, is the simplicity. I'm sorry, Catherine.
I just want to reiterate that this extra criteria was really to address some of these other properties like Carrie's shown you. I think it makes the ordinance more defensible, but I'm not at all saying that if you just do it by the ag zoning, that it will not be defensible. It just gives us another argument to make if someone were to challenge it.
Right.
I greatly appreciate Councilmember Wilson's vigor in representing her ward, and I completely understand that. And if I understand you correctly, is you are wanting to get some type of a reduction in this. If you go back and look at the utility that was a huge failure before, those fees, and I'm asking some of my Ward 5 constituents here, those fees were $10, $20, $30, $60, $80. Now we have a simple fee that is 3, 6, no more than 9. Okay? We have simplified it, given them credit for their long gravel driveways or their outbuildings. We're now specific just this. So they are winning something, okay? Has that ever been conveyed to your constituents?
Yes.
And they still aren't happy with it, so they're still gonna vote no.
So when I knock doors to get this seat, I knocked 2,000 doors, and every door I asked, and I was kind of ducked every time I said it, like, what do you want to do about stormwater, And I would say that the majority of people, and I have to also qualify the fact that I have a large percentage of my voters that are urban, so they actually want something. They're like, why have you not done this yet, Sarita? So it's a really fun world I live in. But the ones, I almost crossed the line at 48. I'm okay with paying a little bit, but I don't feel like XYZ was meant. I never wanted to be in the city of Norman to begin with. I was annexed out here. I can't sell my land to my kids. I can't sell 5 acres off. I can't do, I'm in a WQPZ zone now, and I'm in a, you know, there's just all of this stuff, like I can't get my 10 horn cleaned out on my private road because we allowed a lot of really shoddy developments out there. It was a city practice that happened years ago, 70s, 80s. Your urban folks, whatever we need to do, whatever, St. James Park, those guys, they pay HOA fees, they have the, you know, all this stuff, they're fine with that. And so for me, I kind of went down this path with the 48th Street. You don't get any city services, you have to maintain your septic, you have a well, you don't have fire hydrants. You have a very long haul to get an ambulance, a police officer, fire department. I mean, these are things that we're actually experiencing all the time, and we don't get any credit for that. That's not something you're, oh, I'm gonna get another $10 this month because the ambulance can't reach me. You know, it's not happening. And so there's just a little angry east of 48th Street, they don't want to participate, they're not getting a lot, and I know that to the bridge thing, that's actually gonna happen. Everybody's getting the bond. I'm not suggesting we monkey around with bond. Everybody will be paying for that capital project situation. It's the utility, it's the, is there gonna be a street sweeper? If somebody goes out there, I want you guys to all go knock doors and tell those people they're gonna get a street sweeper, because it's not fun. Street sweeper's never, ever gonna happen. We'll get some cleanup of the culverts, but most of the houses aren't on streets, that are city streets.
Okay,
I think Councilmember Hickman has his hand up.
I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay, so that horse is, I should say, this issue's been discussed a lot. I want to move on to two other issues that, at the Ward 3 forum that we had, one of the overwhelming themes was HOAs. And that this, forget the fee, the way this is structured, that HOAs are double taxed and they're not relieved of their liability. And so I think that has to be addressed.
Well,
I think that's not just a Ward 3 issue, I think that's almost every HOA, I would think, feels like we're still responsible for our stormwater, our detention here, and we're paying in it for everybody else. We're not gonna, so that has got, and I know there's $1.5 million in the budget for that. That's gonna be spread out citywide for homeowners assistance. That's not enough. I mean, Anthony already told us we don't have enough money to do this anyway, much less, that's gonna be the first thing cut. So I think we have to address the HOA issue. The other thing is, this is not enough money. The general fund cannot subsidize $3 million a year for stormwater. One of the very first points the gentleman from Han says, and this motto is, there really is a serious problem that must be addressed. It's our duty to tackle. We are being irresponsible to ignore it. You're being irresponsible if you don't address the financial impact of this. Great, we can do this for 2 or 3 years. We got stormwater does this, but now we're cutting police and fire because we're cleaning out ditches. Right? And I know that means the fee has to be higher. I get that. But we have to address that.
Okay, guys, right now, we have the very best chance that we're going to have in 2 to 3 years to address this utility issue. If we cannot come together and make this decision, what Councilmember Castleberry is talking about is going to double and triple. I understand that we are not looking at something that's going to fully fund the stormwater, but we have to get something. We have to get started. We are going to be irresponsible if we don't do this, despite all of the arguments. It will be totally fiscally irresponsible of this council if we do not get this on the ballot and if we do not have stormwater fees. And we're going to lose all of the work that's been done for over 2 years. It wasn't just the committee. We did work the year after the stormwater. We did public meetings. We had a task force. It's all going to be gone. Yes. Bill.
We developed this dollar figure not by just taking carte blanche what public
Why don't
works
you
told
consider-
us. But the point is that what we came up with was requirements-based. It wasn't just we're gonna buy everything for everybody. We cut things out.
This is not fully funded. I know this is not the, but
Indeed. But the bare truth is, we need something, as the mayor was saying. Whatever it is, we need something. If it's not based on this fee structure, if it's just $2 a household throughout, that's something more than we have right now, and it will do some good. So the point is, yes, we need a fee, and I understand the politics of the situation, that if we don't do it now, there are extenuating circumstances that really don't allow it to surface again for a number of years, be it water increases or what have you. So whatever we can get out of this, it isn't fully funded. We know that. We knew that when we advertised the figure we did. But we need to do something.
Okay.
I want to add something too. Throughout the Citizen Committee discussion, we understood that we have to get started, but this thing will change and need to be modified going forward. And I was surprised talking to some citizens that they thought that was a surprising aspect of it, that we would think that whatever we put out there would be changed in the future. It's a starting place. We have to start with something. But we as a committee understood that things will change and it will be modified over time to continue being the best service that we could have.
So when you guys talked about that, if we came back and said, okay, 3 to 5 years from now, hey, we passed something 3 or 5 years ago, it's kind of starting point, we need to double it, or we need, how do you think that'll go over? Are you gonna say, we just floated them?
I think you
What's
go
our
back-
ability to,
You go back
show-
and you've got something to show the voters. Here's what we have done with what we've got.
And here's what's
It's,
changed.
it's not done. But with what we've got so far, here's what we've done. And you can list out things one right after the other of all the projects that you've done, all the maintenance that you're doing.
If all we buy
And
is
then-
TV equipment and manpower to be able to investigate the storm sewers in this city, if that's all we do, that's a positive, and it gives us evidence for what we need to do from here.
Councilman Cook.
I have a comment and then a question. My comment would be, or request would be, if we were inclined to make any changes, which I'm mulling over in my mind, I think that it would be prudent to have the Citizen Committee reconvene and opine as to those potential changes. We've had a process, many of y'all know, and for better or worse, I've been a process-driven person on council, I feel like, and it seems to me that it potentially challenges the work of our Citizen Committee for X number of months and years to change it, like last time, when I was not on council, the night of the vote. The last minute, that troubles me and concerns me, but that could potentially be alleviated, if you will, if we took advantage of the Citizen Committee, that I think is probably the best attribute of this process, to get them to weigh in on whether they do or do not support whatever change that we're potentially contemplating. That's my comment. My question is, I think for Sean, of the detention features we have in our HOAs, how many of them collect or used as part of the stormwater infrastructure for the collection of water, stormwater that is not generated from that HOA, such as the example of Cambridge? Do we have any idea?
I would think it's a very small percent. Let's say, just for number purposes, you have about 300 detention facilities in Norman today, so about 300 HOAs theoretically. Of those, Cambridge, the types that are Cambridge-oriented that are regional detention basins, 1% maybe.
We do get some in ours from Robinson. I mean, from, both Robinson and
Okay.
Correct.
48th.
Your two are more inclined because your two were built in the.
It's not like
watershed.
a massive percentage,
Right.
but it is, probably 10%.
but most of them are very small and only collect that immediate section of that subdivision. I would offer too, to Governor Castleberry's point, appreciate the point, but we work with HOAs all the time, and what they tell us, and Chris can probably verify this, is they're not raising enough money to take care of their stormwater problems. That's why you're here. So they're not getting double taxed. They need help from this program, which is why the committee selected $1.25 million in help for those folks, because they're raising just enough to mow your grass and keep your fences or signs up, is what I hear from them.
But they're going to be responsible. I mean, if there's a failure, one of those things, would the city not come in and fix it and assess everybody in that HOA?
If it were a public safety issue, the city would. Most of them would
And I
not.
think that's what people are concerned about, that liability up there. I know we've got that stamp on that plat that says, hey, we need to come in from a public safety standpoint and fix it. We're going to fix it, and you guys are going to pay for it.
Right.
Where, you know, we're doing a lot of bond issues. We're doing this bond issue to fix a lot of areas around town, but if we had one specific deal, you know, in case I ever talk to someone like, I'm not happy about this law.
Yeah, I mean,
I just got assessed $1,000, and now you're gonna, you know.
I think we have to be fair on issues like that, and I'll just say what I said in another venue, that if an HOA's stormwater facility detention bond is collecting water as part of the stormwater infrastructure, like and this is where I try to join the neighborhood people with my core people, because then I start pitted against each other. If, like in Core Norman, the creeks are part of the infrastructure. The water goes into the creeks. Those creeks sometimes run behind people's backyards. That's considered private property. Sometimes the city has access to those. But because of the way our stormwater infrastructure works, those creeks are eroding, and therefore it's impacting people's private property. We are not going to make those people in my area, in Core Norman, pay for those repairs, even though it's on their private land, because it's part of the stormwater infrastructure. I think that same analogy should apply to other areas like the HOAs who have detention facilities like Cambridge and maybe Arbor Lakes and others, whose detention facilities are collecting water as a part of the overall stormwater infrastructure system for other people, because that seems to be an analogous situation that would be fair. And so if that means, and Councilmember Casper knows these details better than I do, but if that means releasing them from liability in some fashion and crafting a policy that ensures that in the event something happens, if they're going to be a part of the, recognized as part of the infrastructure of the stormwater system, which it seems to me maybe they should be, then I do think that's something we need to do now, so we have the chance of improving our opportunity to get HOA people to support this, to support what we're doing as well. So that's my question, and I guess my comment.
I'm very comfortable looking at a policy, and Dr. Carter's had his hand up, but just let me say that while we're looking at the policy, if we don't have a stormwater utility, we don't have the $1.5 million to help the neighborhoods. That's built into this. Dr. Carter.
They answered their question.
I just want to say, and I've talked about it, I think, with you guys before, I live in an HOA, and we have a retention and a detention pond, and I think that in the beginning, we supported, at least Andy and I did, talking to the committee about doing exactly what Councilmember Hickman and Castleberry just mentioned, taking over everything. And we asked Carrie to work those numbers. It's about $11.5 million program. If we take over all of that infrastructure, if the city takes over all that infrastructure and maintains it properly, we'll need to raise between $11 and $12 million.
A year?
A year.
See, I disagree with that, because I think what you would probably do is, I assume we're going to have some more stormwater bond packages in the future. This is not the one and done.
Sure, right.
You would address those major issues in future bond packages for certain areas.
So those are major repairs, right, but not ongoing maintenance and gotta come out and fix something when it's broken, right? I mean, I'm trying to understand.
Right. Yeah, but I'm saying that if Cambridge fails, that's not coming out of the general fund. That's just, I mean, we're gonna do a bond, it'll be a bond issue, maybe reimbursed. I mean, you're gonna have to look at those major deals and get them in there. I just think you have.
I don't disagree with that.
You know,
When you're
so I
talking
think
about
there's
capital
some funding
fixes.
issues that we can do on that type of stuff. But I mean, I'm like, Mr. Scanlon here, I mean, we gotta fix his deal. I mean, that's not gonna get fixed. Just on, we don't have enough money to fix it. You know,
So what is your suggestion for having enough money to fix it?
I've already done this. I've already run this number and nobody will even look at it. I've already run it. I've given it to everybody out here. I mean, I raised more money than you guys did. That's $7.4 million. And it's actually, anyway. What I'm hearing is you guys, City Council, need to step up to the plate and fix the problem. Don't put a Band-Aid on this. Leave. Fix it. If you guys really think you got a problem, then fix it.
Well,
We're willing to pay if you'll fix it. You just put a Band-Aid on it, you know.
Well, you know, I'm sorry.
I know that's tough. I know that's tough. It's a tough ask.
It's tough, but how can you call it a Band-Aid when we're doing nearly a $60 million bond issue and we're raising enough money to get very close to the medium, I can't remember what you all called them, but it's not the lowest, it's the better program. How can we call that a Band-Aid?
It's a Band-Aid because in 3 years, we don't have the money in the general fund. It doesn't solve, I mean, it doesn't solve our financial problem. It just postpones it. And so I think you have to look at a bigger approach here. As Anthony pointed out, this is not just a stormwater deal. We talked about some of our major core problems in revenue expenditures. This is a way to solve it. And what's going to happen 4 or 5 years from now, we go say, hey, we need another half-cent sales tax for a regional transit authority. I mean,
I don't know, but we are worrying about the stormwater right now.
the stormwater is a budget issue.
It is
It's
a
a
budget
budget
issue,
issue
but we
also.
need to pass this.
Fine.
Councilmember Scott.
Okay, so you're concerned with the HOAs and that we are not gonna be taking care of them as well as we should be.
Correct.
And we're also gonna be, the general fund will be subsidizing stormwater and we're gonna go broke in a few years, we're not gonna be able to uphold our promises.
And when we try and
And
ask
so,
for the
let me-
second vote,
let me finish.
let me just finish that second vote, they're gonna say, you guys didn't do it the first time.
Okay, well, so let's consider adding a couple of tiers, the higher tiers, because some of these HOAs do have larger square footage and absorbing some, but not all, of those infrastructure fees. So I know they have to take care of themselves, and we're talking about charging them and then not taking care of them. Let's consider taking care of some of those, but not all of it, and then revisiting it later. Because we have to start somewhere. That's exactly what Sean just said. We have to start somewhere. So if we're going to consider absorbing some HOAs, not all of it, then let's add another higher tier, like you suggested in your plan. That raise more money, right? That helps the general fund, so the general fund is not subsidizing any of it, okay?
Councilmember Carter.
Robert, would you please remind me of your tiers?
I can't remember what they were.
I think the highest
It
was
was-
17.
The highest was 18.
Was it, I sent it to you guys before, it was like 4, 9, 18.
Just 3 tiers?
For residential,
Yeah.
and basically what I did is I said, okay, let's divide it in
I
thirds.
remember what you did, I just want.
But on commercial, I took the top 10% of that top tier, broke it out into mega tier, super tier, I call it super size.
Yeah.
And
What was that number? Guess.
I want to say it's like 150.
Okay.
Okay, here, hold on, I got it. This is what we've got
I
here.
just want to make a comment while you guys were talking about it.
He's got it.
And I remember this at a Ward 3 meeting last year. We started talking about HOAs, because obviously Ward 3 has a lot of HOAs, and there was a group of gentlemen who were furious and weren't at all interested in paying $1 to help HOAs, because they don't have them, they don't get, and so my point is
I remember all those guys.
yeah, so you have, and we've heard that a lot, actually, I'll tell you that. That's why we're very careful to call it neighborhood assistance, private stormwater infrastructure, privately owned. Because you have a lot of, you either are in an HOA or you're not. And the people who are in HOAs are sympathetic to the HOAs, and the people who are not are like, I don't want to pay for that. I don't wanna pay for that.
I want to take over the entire system.
I
no matter whether
understand
you're HOA or
that.
not.
My point is, the only point I'm trying to make, regardless, is you may disenfranchise non-HOA voters if you sell it as we're gonna, solve all the HOA problems. That's the only point I'm trying to make.
And I am more than willing to change, but it was $3, $8, $18.
$3, $8, okay, and commercial?
Commercial was 15, 30, 125, and 200. Here's your concept. The largest residential houses will pay 6 times as much as the lower. The largest commercial will pay 15 times, or 14 times more. So the whole, golly, Bob Stoops is paying $9. Now he's paying 18. I mean, he's paying 6 times more than I am. I think you get away from the numbers, and to be honest with you, net raises $6.7 million.
Plus an ag credit.
And without an ag credit, and we can tweak that a little bit, but that also put over half of the small businesses at less than $30 a month. It puts 67% of residents under $8 a month. So, I mean, and I'm more than willing to tweak that, but that was a discussion started that we never got even talked about, and it raised almost $3 million more than this plan right here. And it kept, percentage-wise, it kept everybody, 3/4 people were below $8, just like in this one, except you're both 6.
I apologize for I apologize for my tardiness. I have a school board meeting tonight. I apologize on that. My second set of deal. So I'm just catching up, and I apologize for that. But I know the committee, you probably have mentioned this, really thought about all of these things, and I think one of the main considerations, I know that Amanda, you were hitting on this, is every single time you say things like the Bob Stoops house, well, that creates, and I'm certainly supportive of that, and I'm certainly not Bob
That's
Stoops.
just an example everybody gives me.
Well, or whatever, I'm certainly a large home.
And he's got 2
But
detention
the reason I
ponds,
say that
no
is
problem.
that creates a fraction of individuals that are going to be opposed to this because they feel it's unfair. So the reason why this committee, candidly, so very much wanted to have those tiers be there is because we all thought if we can get them low enough and nominal enough, then we hopefully believe that everybody across the entire community can support this, whether that be a tiered system or a flat fee. That was really, so that you, and you might remember that, Councilmember Cassary, I'm looking around, I think everybody, you were the one, and Mayor, certainly you were there as well. That was a very big consensus. So my great fear about considering that, and I'm certainly open to any ideas. I mean, I think the biggest thing here is that we find something to put forward to that helps try to solve some of the budget concerns you have, and let's find a unified response for stormwater. I think the tiered system or flat fee, I think the committee by and large, we felt like we went back and forth on that. But I think what I do worry about is finding extremes. It's kind of, get your bell curve out. And the more you find, because I think that creates more differences of fairness, in my opinion. Now, I certainly understood that there were some very strong emotional responses, and I think factual responses early on in our discussion as a committee about the flat fee. It was very appropriate. That's why you had the tiered fee. It was certainly to find something we felt like was nominal enough, whether that be for, I understood your Councilmember Wilson, excuse me, the ag credit. I know, sorry, I was looking at him and I switched. I apologize. I do know. Is to find something that is, I think, where you're not going to have anybody that's going to look at this and say that I have been treated so disparately and differently than someone else. Because I think this is a community-wide problem. And I think it absolutely, if we're going to solve this, it has to be a community-wide solution. So the more that we find a pocket or a piece of a community that we are distinguishing as different than someone else, in my very much strong estimation, that is going to create a much more likely challenge for us to have this actually be approved by our voters. So certainly whatever you describe is right. I think the tiered approach, when it comes to her, you said that, I prefer the tier, I get that. I just would really be cautious about how different you make those tiers. But in the same thing, I want to be fair about who's causing the issue. I understand that concern as well, but I really think the committee, that was our idea. If we find something that's nominal enough that people understand, I'm a community member, that this is a problem, and I have to step up and make a solution because I want the best Norman possible, then I think that's going to be your best public educational model. I think that's going to be the place that we found the most success in our road shows. I say road shows, town halls. What do we call them, Gary? Open houses. Thank you. Not town halls, whatever they're called. The road shows. But I think that's important to know.
And then
and Councilmember Carter had his hand up, and Councilmember Scott. I do want to say about the more we tinker with this, what we have done is we've been out in the public and we have been talking about these rates. We have not gotten that negative a response in the meetings that we've had. They have been fairly positive responses. People have not, now the issue about homeowners and the issues about neighborhoods, we've talked about that. That's why we've got the 1.5. But so many of these things that we've talked about, the committee talked about all of those things. I've sat through most of those meetings. And the second problem is, if you add something now, there are all sorts of consequences to adding it that we don't know what they are yet. So if we vote on Tuesday night to change what we've been talking about in a substantial way, maybe we could get away with putting the ag credit on there, because so many people have heard about Ward 5 and how unfair it was, and they don't know that there's agricultural land all over Norman. Maybe that would go. But I think if we do too much with this, every time you change something, you get another group that's going to go after whatever you changed it to. That is what happens. We have a stack, like I was going to bring it in and I forgot. We have a stack like this. How many pages, Sean, of the different utility rate structures we looked at?
Tiered structure.
We added tiers, we took tiers away, we changed the tiers, we changed the percentage, we changed the ratio. We did everything. And we couldn't agree. And every time we'd have one, there'd be some group of people that came in that was upset about how unfair it was. So that's my fear, is that if we change things too much, we don't know what other group we're gonna upset. So, Councilmember Carter.
It's one of those deals, if I'm paying the same as Bob, why am I paying the same as Bob Stoops? Because we value you. We value you just as much as we do Bob Stoops.
Thompson is the lead in this campaign.
Councilmember Carter.
Go ahead and shut up.
We just found a job for him.
Maybe Bob will pay for the whole campaign.
Remember Bob's
Yes, campaign.
He's retired, he's retired.
Okay, Joe, jump in there.
Andy, just to bring you up to speed.
Yeah, I apologize.
No, I'm just happy you came because I value your opinion and your leadership. So one of the things that Representative from Hahn brought up is number one was a consensus between staff, elected officials, and the citizen group on what we're doing. And a unified voice sends a message to this community that we believe in it, and it's in a fragmented voice will signal that there's a problem, okay? So one of the components of that is a unanimous vote. I mean, I feel a unanimous vote of council to send this, whatever we decide to send forward. So there are, what I've notes tonight have jotted down four, I'm just gonna use the term organized opposition, that we recognize that are putting pressure on council. The fourth group, which I'm gonna share with you, that, I met with a group of people that are concerned with the fairness, and so a different rate structure is more favorable to them, where the graph of the size of the home basically parallels the fee. Like the 369 is kind of this weird stair step. It is fairer than a flat in their mind, but it's not as fair as it could be. For example, they would be happy with a 2.5, 5, 12. Okay, just saying that's their. And so I'm very sensitive to what Robert, and in theory, very much agree with what he said. That there's revenue failure, and his 3.818, tiered fee structure. Then there's some organized opposition with the HOAs, conceivably, and whether or not we address putting them into our stormwater plan. And then there's ag. So the ag credit, revenue failure fee structure, a fairer fee structure, and HOA concerns, I think we as a council are gonna vote next Tuesday, correct, Mayor? And that's the first formal vote, correct? Then there's one more vote?
No, this
This
is the
is the
final
final
one. This
vote.
is it.
This is it.
We did this first
In
reading.
theory, we could amend it.
Table it.
In there, yes,
Okay.
we can
I'm
amend
just- I'm
it.
just asking.
Yes, we
Okay.
can.
So in theory, we could amend it. And so I think to Councilman Hickman's point about the process, Amanda, is it possible the committee, or would it be reasonable to ask the committee to meet between now and Tuesday and examine those 4 areas and bring forward a recommendation if you support those 4 things, or not support them? You know, leave it a B, add the ag credit, add this recognition of infrastructure and home water utilities, recognize, you know, examine this fee structure that Robert proposes, examine this 4th fee structure that the fairness group, I'll call them, propose, and give us a thumbs up or thumbs down. And then we as a body then can consider that as an amendment or not an amendment, and then we vote. And then hopefully we have a unanimous opinion, you know, a unanimous vote. We get a lot of excitement and momentum, because to me this is an urgent and important problem, you know. And I think the good Lord blessed us this past fall with 2 telling examples. One was the collapse of the bridge on Main Street, and we are so lucky that a carload of kids coming back from the bars that night didn't dive off into that bridge and drown. The second example was when the car was swept off the road into Imhoff Creek. And we're just blessed that it wasn't a mobility challenged senior or someone with a disability in that car and they drowned, because that's what could have happened in both of those circumstances. So we have had the wake-up call. We need action. We need to move forward, but we need it to be a unanimous vote of council, and we need to do our best to address the organized opposition in this community, and I feel like it's going to have to come through you guys, giving us direction to move forward.
All right,
I think Brett wanted to
okay, you all are the committee, so you're being asked to do something else.
I appreciate your comments and Councilman Castleberry's comments about not raising enough. We were tasked back in May of 2017. In January 22 of 2018, this committee sent to you all a recommendation. Is either flat fee or tiered structure of 3, 6, and 9. So we have already made that decision once, okay? We appreciate the Ms. Wilson's comments about Ward 5. We think we probably have addressed those, showing that you all are getting something better than what was before. It's not enough money, we understand that. In 3 years, when the city budget goes negative, in 3 years, can we come back and amend the 3, 6, and 9 to a 3, 8, 18 at that point in time? Because then we have shown some goodwill with what we've been tasked with in raising a utility and show the benefits of what this has done. We have proven ourselves at that point in time, 3 years down the road. But we've got to start somewhere. We've already made a recommendation once. It's ready for you all next Tuesday to vote on. Sorry, did I overstep my bounds?
I would add to that, I don't know logistically that we could get the committee here to meet before Tuesday. You know, this notice of this meeting went out a week ago, and if we had a quorum here tonight, maybe we would ask the quorum to vote. But we don't have a quorum right now. So we can't, I don't know that we logistically can get them back together. I'm not saying we can't try. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Brett just said as a co-chair.
We met, you were there, we met in November. That's the first time we had met in, 8 or 9 months. Everybody still wholeheartedly agreed with the recommendations we put forward last spring. There was no wavering there, and we did have all but one committee member there that day, so it wasn't a small section, or 2 committee members anyway. So also too, I did want to, utility rates are always going to need increases over time. That's something we need to remember. We deal with that with water and wastewater, and so that's one thing that we can acknowledge. Also on the neighborhood assistance, the HOA issue, this funding would also include, just a side note, detention pond inspections. That is in this plan. Okay, so that is a little bit of an assistance. But I just wanted to comment on Councilman Carter's questions. I'm not saying we can't.
The thing that's different now, guys, is that now it's important. I mean, now it's nut cutting time. If this is when you gotta make a decision. Are we going backwards or are we gonna stay the same? So I don't know if, Mayor, we need to have a series of amendment votes, maybe that's what we need to do in this council meeting. Vote on the ag, vote on the HOA, vote on the Roberts fee structure, and vote on this other fee structure. Maybe those two can be blended into one, but so that we can say at least to our constituents that we've recognized their concerns and the council as a whole decided to move in a different direction, and I don't think we've made our best effort. I mean, I feel like I've made my best effort, and then I would be comfortable voting with however those amendments went up or down to move forward with the problem, because I think we have to address it.
Okay. What I'm hearing the committees say is they're ready for us to do that. I did hear Amanda before say they would support us. Now, I don't know how far they would go with that if we keep adding and subtracting. Councilmember Scott.
Thank you for recognizing me. I'm gonna keep it real short and sweet. I think some of these things get too complicated, and we're already working with something so complex. And Amanda, I know that we talked about not changing too much between first and second reading. I like parts of Robert's fee structure. I think we could move forward the 3, 6, and 12. I think that makes the stair step a little bit more equitable. It meets some of our fair fees people in the middle. And I want to shift the conversation a little bit, because we haven't talked about the commercial rates at all whatsoever. We've been very fixated on residential, and what Councilor Castleberry presented, there's actually 4 tiers, and they put less burden on smaller businesses and more of the burden on larger businesses, which I think is more equitable as well. And that's what I'd like to move forward with, is his commercial structure and a 3, 6, 12 residential. And I respect everything that you guys have done. I 100% appreciate you guys for all of the time and effort you've put in. And I know the 369 was just, here's something that's more fair, and I hope you don't mind moving it up to 12 as far as the highest tier goes, and keeping the others. And that's where I'm standing. And keeping the ag tier, I'm not super worried about the HOAs. Maybe we absorb a little bit.
We're making 2 amendments then.
The ag
talking
tier,
about what
is
she
something
is
we've already talked.
supporting.
Yeah, I'm supporting
We're not to
the 3, 6, and 12. If we want to keep the commercial fees where they are so that nobody objects to it in the community, fine. We got to start somewhere, right? We give the A1 and A2 zoning areas their ag tier, and then we need to meet with the HOAs. I need to meet with the HOAs in Ward 8, talk to them, see how we can help them and help absorb some of their burden as well.
So for clarification, or if that's what you're suggesting, will the square footage breakpoints be what the
What you've already
369 was in our
defined.
plan, or because his breakpoints are a little different?
Yeah.
The highest tier is 1,800 square foot and over.
Let's keep with what you've got, because that's what we're familiar with, and then just add $3 to that last tier.
I would say the only way that you could do it and not, because they are broken down differently, and that top $9 tier starts houses that are like, it includes houses that are like 2,100 square feet.
The 1,800 square foot and
1,800, they're
larger
not
is
that-
the top, is the high tier for
That's me.
Councilman Castleberry's
I'm paying
plan.
$12 in that.
Let me just be clear, mine's a starting point.
I understand.
want to, that's my Excel spreadsheet.
I understand that.
Before
Okay.
we had the calculator, I'd like to run those numbers through the calculator.
You don't want to,
Because
you don't want to mess up with.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at your calculator
Like
that I took a screenshot of at your Ward 3 meeting when you had gone and spent a little bit of time on the calculator.
Okay, so that's.
So maybe that was my mistake.
Yeah.
You were talking about a different plan maybe.
Okay,
Comments,
okay.
Mayor, if I
Yes.
might. I think,
Andy.
we're talking about all the dares and stuff. I think one of the things you said, Councilmember Carter, that I actually believe in more than anything else you've talked about tonight is absolutely you have to have a unanimous vote. Whatever it takes to get there, we'll take that to get this across the finish line. And each and every single one of you publicly supporting the effort. Now, I'm not saying necessarily you have to support every single piece of it, because you never do. That's part of compromise. That's part of finding the right answer and solution. Really, like Councilmember Butler, you can relate to that, I'm sure, back in your time in this world. It's not easy, but I think that's absolutely essential. And so I appreciate you saying that. I think that's the charge that we have before us tonight, and you will have specifically next Tuesday. So what that number looks like as a tier, I agree with Committee Member Cabas. I think that we're in a place where we've done a lot of research, and I think analysis and data, and we determined what the actual need was. We had different levels of need. So the reason the tiers were chosen is not because we thought that's what someone could pay, or that was what this was appropriate, or that was, it certainly had overtures of that. But absolutely, I go back to the reason why the committee chose those tiers was because we said we need this many dollars to create the maintenance and the solutions that will absolutely take care, not by the way, not solve, but will move us the right direction to trying to find a solution for our stormwater issues that we have within this community. So we can change tiers, sure, you can do that. I think that's maybe okay. That may change the dollars that are needed. That may make people go, are you paying me more than what I need? Because that is something that's been discussed. To me, whether that be 2, 6, 12, we went all over the map on that too. But I really do believe, and I certainly appreciate the fact that those tweaks may have to happen. I personally would prefer that those amendments happen tonight and get figured out so that you bring a consensus a unanimous deal together to Tuesday night. And instead of it being one-off, I agree with this, I get a 7-2 on that, I don't like that. Personally, as a citizen, I think it's time, and I agree with Brett, it's time to actually say, you know what, this is what we're gonna go with or not. And that's okay. If you guys decide we're not quite ready, I'm not gonna like that, but that's life, and I'll support that. I absolutely will support and care for each and every single one of you for the bond. I think that's generally been accepted and thought. I think that's huge. But I will tell you, the utility, unless we get that figured out very strong and in a very, very cohesive manner, it's gonna be challenging. And I think that as a committee, we talked about it. So that's the charge to me, and I would actually love it to be done tonight, so that we can move towards on Tuesday. Well, I don't mean solved or voted tonight, but a general consensus maybe reached. I know everybody's here, but I think that's cool.
And one thing that hadn't been discussed tonight, we've talked about all these prices and everything. We have not gone back to the bond issue. These people with larger houses are gonna be paying a lot more in their bond issue. That's why the utility is kept so simple, because the bond issue is gonna take
Okay, so then 369 plus the bond plus the ag,
And
then
all of the ag folks
the-
would still pay
What
the
other
bond.
amendments did you have, Joe?
It's just this question about the numbers, I just think we need to have this discussion, and then we can tell them we have,
Yeah, let me
So Ms.
read off it, let me read off of this chart where the monthly effective stormwater cost. So for a large house, $9, the bond part would be $22.10. They're paying $31 a month. That's a pretty good amount of money. And if they have a really large house, like the ones we talk about, the 7,000, the 10,000, the 15,000, they're paying a lot more in that set bond issue. They're paying a ton. That's what I thought was so brilliant about what they came up with, was because it helped balance how much the people in the larger houses were paying with the people in the smaller houses. And a lot of these people that are in the much smaller houses, a lot of those will be renters. They won't have to be paying bond at all.
Okay, so 369 plus the bond plus the ag.
I would go with that.
Can I ask a question about the ag real quick first, because I'm still not a fan of that, but is it $100,000 we're taking off when we do that? 112,000. So we're reducing everything by 100,000 when we do that. Does everybody realize that?
Right.
First off. Secondly, I guess my question would be, is there a way to, if we're gonna, instead of just going, everybody in ag land gets a credit and their deal is half, how about we do it based on their actual footprint of runoff more realistically? And we give her $100,000 tasked with, she's got to give discounts throughout the city, county ag, county rain barrels or something. You've got $100,000 to work with, because you want the guy on, you showed me that's going to get a massive credit. He's got a 7,000 square foot house and no grass on the whole property, but he's gonna pay half. How's that fair? You know, I own land in rural, not in Norman, but in another town. I've got 2 ponds that get filled up from that land. There's runoff. There is runoff. And to say there's not.
The utility though is to handle the run, to clean up and to maintain the infrastructure.
But those people from West Norman, from East Norman, all come to the middle of Norman. I mean, we're all paying for everything.
Councilmember Carter.
I have another process question, forgive me. Okay, is this a real city council meeting?
No, this is,
This is
we
a
can't
study
vote.
session. We
This
can't
is a
vote.
discussion.
We can't put an amendment out and vote it up or
But
down.
we could
I
agree to things.
I understand that.
Okay, well, that's
We're trying to
all,
agree.
yeah.
So what Councilmember Scott has put forward, she said, how about we do the 3 tiers and put the ag credit, and we pretty much already agreed to the bond, and that's what, the 3 tiers are already on there. The only
Well, why don't we
amendment,
use Robert's commercial tier structure?
Oh, okay, see, I like that.
And I'd have to run through there. I want to make sure that we stick with I like the 45, I like those pie charts. I do have a question for Catherine, I guess, or Carrie. Historically, has a city had to come in and fix any stormwater issues across the city? At HOA?
We have,
Okay.
we have done that,
Example.
Cambridge.
That was $25,000.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying we
No,
still a lot of
that's
money,
not
but,
fixed.
but
That's fixing one flood. I'm talking,
$25,000 on somebody's neighborhood from the city, yeah, that's a lot of money.
they paid $25,000 too. It was a 50-50 deal. I'm talking about $100,000. I mean, I'm talking about a major failure of a infrastructure system.
Okay.
And the reason why I ask that is, if you release those HOAs from the liability of that big deal, and we as a city assume it, what is that risk? And I think it's very, very little, but it gains us a lot of votes.
So you're talking about just releasing liability, not maintaining it forever?
I definitely want to release liability.
So if something fails, the city comes in and.
City comes in and fixes it, but it does not put a lien on everybody's house that's out there.
but we're not maintaining it, and that's it. We're counting on them to maintain it.
We're gonna maintain it as best we can,
And
with
then
what
we're
we
gonna
got.
fix it when it breaks.
I mean, ideally, I'd like to, it was fully funded, we'd maintain it, but we're gonna maintain it as best we can. You know, ultimately, we should maintain it, just like any other street. I mean, those detention ponds, just like our roadways. We maintain all the roads throughout the city. We should maintain all the streams and ponds throughout the city too.
Okay.
I know it's a money deal, but.
So they'll have to give easements to the city.
Mr. Martin, back there in the back, you've been listening to the discussion, could you give us some insight on maybe the business community, what?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Today, in preparation for the meeting, I tried to look up some older records.
Could you come
closer? I can't hear you very well. Have a chair. Mind if I sit down? Is that good?
No, please do.
In preparation for tonight's meeting, I tried to look up some records from the last election and where the chamber was prior to my arrival, and to try to get a feel for what solutions we might find palatable. I could find a few things. One was a resolution that we passed in opposition to the last election. And part of the letter that was sent to the paper mentioned that that was few and far between. Rarely did the chamber oppose anything, any proposal, bond, sales tax, anything like that that the city had proposed. Not typically anything that we've done. But we felt at the time, I have to believe, and based on what I read, that it was just too inequitable.
You were not the.
I was not there. So this is just what I was reading from some notes and press releases and things. After the election, I saw a memo that went out to our members stating, please give us your input as to what solutions you might be in favor of. I couldn't find a document that said what those solutions were, but the only synopsis I could find was a simple rate for residential, and then a commercial rate that was below $100 at the top tier. So I don't have we have not, because the options on the table have been $5, $6.25, and then the tiered rate, not knowing what direction the city council is going to take. We haven't taken a position. We haven't looked at it yet. Just this week, we did vote to support the school bond election, so we're happy to step up, if we feel compelled to. But looking at it personally, and some have mentioned this, I believe, on various sides of the table, I think simpler is always easier to sell. And I think you tasked the Citizens Committee to come up with some solutions, and that's what I've heard multiple of them express to you, that simpler is easy. And my concern is that the tiered rate convolutes things. And personally, I'm in one of the, I'm in Ward 5 urban area. I wake up every morning into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. I'm in the top tier personally, and I look out my back window to a stormwater detention pond. And I pay an HOA fee that keeps going up every year. Now, I'm willing to contribute to the solution because we have, Councilmember Carter, we have a problem. And that's what all of my chamber leadership and members that I've talked to, no one has not acknowledged that we have a problem. And so let's come up with a solution that works, that will pass. My only concern about about some of the solutions that have been put out there is that they won't pass, and we're in the same position 2 years from now that we are in now, and that the lost revenue from the last 2 or 3 years because of the failed election occurs. So we have not, we've been speaking like you guys have for the last year. As this committee's met, you guys have talked about it. We've been speaking informally, but we have taken no position. But I can tell you most recently, I've had probably the smaller businesses come to me, and not a ton, but a few, who have said, boy, that 160 sounds kind of high. And they're not going to pay it. They would not fall into that rate. I have not gotten a call from any of my large members who have said that it's too high, so please don't get me wrong. But some of my membership has talked about a commercial tiered rate, 12, 30, 60, 90. Councilmember Castleberry, I realize it may not get the full 7 point whatever that you're trying to achieve, but it's something that some of my folks have talked about that they can get behind, and then a flat residential rate that's simple and easy to sell and understand. And let's get it to the voters.
Mayor, if I could interject, we did have a representative, Bob Johnson Controls, on our committee. We did consider, that's the biggest of the big. And she had no problem with what we advertised, what we decided.
What was it?
It was 160.
What is the tiers? What are they?
It's 30, 60, or
12, 40, 80, 160, I think.
12, 45, 80, and 160.
Again, we were across section.
12, 45, 80, and 160.
So I have a question.
So Walmart's the high tier.
Okay, Councilmember Scott has a question for Mr. Scott.
Yeah, so I don't, of the chamber, from a chamber perspective, I don't think we're gonna look at lowering what's already, if we're gonna go forward with the committee's recommendation, and we're gonna go with the residential and the commercial, and all we're adding is an ag tier. That's probably the simplest thing. Are you saying that the chamber is not going to support this?
No, we haven't. Like I said, we don't know what the final proposal was going to be because you've had 3 options in regards to residential, and
And the commercial has remained the same the entire,
there's
each
been
year.
very little discussion about it.
There has
Very
been,
little discussion.
even in this room tonight, there's been very little discussion.
Right,
But
and-
this is what the committee's proposed, and so what I'm asking is that, I mean, we're not making changes to these tiers at this point. Are you gonna fight us on it?
Well, you've talked about
Raising it.
adopting
We're not
Councilmember
doing that,
Castleberry's
though.
tiers
Yeah.
of potentially raising it. So you are talking about shifting them.
Right.
And so I can't tell you if the chamber's going to support or oppose because we don't know what the official proposal is. All I'm telling you is based on discussions I've had with my members is we want to be supportive of a solution, and based on what failed a few years ago and the notes that I've read, we were supportive of a solution where the top tier was lower than $100. And so based on that and what I've been hearing lately, that seems to be something that's palatable.
I will say from my own personal standpoint, as a small business owner, I have a standalone building, okay, which is about the same size as my house as far as footprint goes. And I'm paying $6 for my house, and I'm paying $45 for my business. Same amount of water. I mean, it's just a different, I mean, I'm paying $45 just because of where it's located and how I use that land. Same impervious surface within 10%.
That's where Scott, I would tell you.
Yeah, so that's why I think it's kind of high
Okay.
for small businesses.
If I might, Mayor, I'd like to just
Yes.
add a couple of comments about, I don't mean to step on your toes, Mr. Martin, but I think one of the things the committee talked about was we actually, and this is prior to you, I believe, actually we started, maybe you were there, I don't recall, but I don't think it was conversations any of us had with you, but we did talk about what would fit for the business community. Your recollection, at least is what I understood, and I think it was actually one of our committee members that's not here tonight that suggested that, but it was kind of that we could keep it under $1,000 a year for a business of any size. That would be something that would be preferred. That came from that last discussion. And it was, in fact, as Mr. Scanlon mentioned, it was Vicki Davis, who was one of our committee members, who was one of the leaders at the Johnson Controls, who said, you know what, I can pay a little more, and said I could pay this, $160. I think that would be okay. That's not fun, and I'm gonna have a hard time making that feel good. And I know I'm one of the largest employers, and I'm adding a lot of jobs, and I'm bringing in people that do sales tax, do all the things. You get all those comments, all the things that I think you think of a large employer, that you want to make sure you take care of those large employers because they do a big deal for them. They make a big difference in our community. But I think that was the talk in the committee because we went through that same iteration again. I think of, is this right? Is this wrong? And one of the reasons why you have the impervious and the non-resident resident there so close is because we wanted to make sure that that was as close as we could find to be fair and equitable. I mean, there's always something you can find, but that was why we provided these solutions, was because we felt like it was indicative of trying to find the best solution for the most potential supporters.
I appreciate that, and I'm happy to move forward with what you recommended on a 369 tier grade for residential and the 1245, 160 for commercial. Not raising it, not changing it, and plus the ag fee.
Has anybody asked him about the bond?
Are you-
The bond.
Yeah, the only thing that we've had discussions about is that then brings the equity. You've talked, I've heard discussions about inequity for residential business, what size and everything. Well, if you have a larger footprint, you're going to be paying a lot more on the ad valorem bond. And so I think we have felt that has, brought equity between businesses, residential, small, large. And I have a comment in regards to Johnson Controls and Ms. Davis and her generosity. I think she was also thinking about the impact that she would have absorbed or tried to absorb had the previous vote passed, and it would have been very significant. So when the offers of 160 was put on the table, I'm sure she jumped at it, as opposed to the thousands of dollars that she was going to be faced with having to pay based on the previous solution that was developed.
So I would hope the other businesses that are part of the chamber would feel the same way.
Yes.
Not to be quiet, I mean, I'm just
Well, just
saying.
for reference, Center Fashion Mall will be about $4,000 a month.
In the old one?
No, this current one. And Old Parkway will be $5,000 a month.
Oh,
Pretty much because of the ad valorem part of it.
No. And that's the thing we cannot
So,
forget.
we're trying to renovate that Old Parkway, we're trying to help these people out. The real estate part of it is a big part of what they're paying, so the whole, you're not paying your fair share is made up for in the bond part of it. And they probably contribute more water, but it's also the infrastructure that is more needed for that, so I mean, just.
And I really appreciate you, I gave some much smaller examples, but I appreciate you giving those
Those are my
examples
words.
because it shows that the business community really is going, and the people with bigger homes are going to make up a lot of the difference with the bond issue. Mary Frances,
Yeah, I'm just wondering if citizens.
would you stand up so we can hear you?
Certainly.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if citizens are going to have an opportunity to weigh in, on your deliberations, and this is just deliberations, right? And no voting is going to take place.
Right.
There's three things that as a citizen I'm thinking about. I think you probably know, very rarely agree with Mr. Castleberry. However, he points out quite accurately the disparity here, the $6 and then for $45 for basically the same, and his square footage on his business. The business end is really out of whack. The 369, it's been out there. The mayor's right. Everybody knows that. It's elegant 369. It needs another 12, 15 added to it. The 9 needs to be divided because you have 1,200 square feet. 1,200 square feet and under about for the 3. Then you have 1,200 to about 2,000 for the 6, and anything over 2,000 to 7,000 for the 9. Now, does that sound right? Divide that 2,000 to 7,000 into a couple of more tiers and let them. Somebody who's got a 7,000 square foot house is affluent enough that they will not notice the $15, $18 fee. They won't. And then the bottom line.
Okay, don't hit Scott.
Bottom line, nobody's been talking about. The bottom line is we're under mandates. Okay? There's the total maximum daily load that we've got to meet, and stormwater is a big part of that. Okay? The other thing is the feds, of course. We've got to do that. And there are cities that are paying that $10,000 a day, and we don't have much time to get out from under that. Okay? Do those folks out there understand that even though if you go back and fight the $10,000 fine, the courts can come in and they will tell you, no, you have to pay it, and you're going to do it through ad valorem. Ad valorem. Now, do businesses and the people with all those properties out there understand that the ad valorem is going to increase and pay for all of this if they don't pass the stormwater utility?
I'd like to interject. You mentioned that the penalties, that loomed large in our discussions. And it was one of the major drivers in our coming up with the requirements level for this fee because of that very thing, because of the potential of a $10,000 incident a day fine. So we're saying to ourselves, we need to do these things for the following reasons, and that was a major reason why. So we haven't forgotten it.
So no, you guys haven't forgotten it, but the citizenry haven't been told. They don't know. I mean, that's got to be a large part of your education.
I think you make a really good point, Mary Frances.
Anyway, We
That's-
have
that's
talked
my
about
three
it
points.
in meetings, but you make a very good point, and we kind of talked about that in our study meeting today, that we haven't talked about that enough, and we will do that. We'll put it in there.
Good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Councilmember Scott.
And thank you for the opportunity to vent myself here. And I'm just so amazed at myself that I'm agreeing with them.
I got beer, we agree on a couple things.
Anyway, I think between the two of you, our committee has come up with a nice compromise. So, honestly, this is, I think you guys have really weighed the political piece of it, on all of it. I think you've done a fabulous job.
They did offer a flat rate, though. That was one of their solutions.
Yes, and I
board meetings are not like
understand. Yes, and even at my board meetings, but it's not equitable, and this is what we're moving forward with. So, thank you. Thank you for your recommendations.
Mayor, I do have one
And
question.
Yes, do you have any more questions for Scott? I appreciate your getting up here.
My pleasure.
I cannot tell, I need to really say this in this meeting. This will not go forward if we cannot get the support of our businesses and larger groups of people. I mean, we have the responsibility to get out there. We need the chamber to be on our side. We really, really do. It's important. So I really appreciate Scott coming and sitting through this whole thing and being willing to get up and talk.
Most of you are members of the chamber, so I appreciate that, and we want to be partners with you on this.
Mayor,
What
this
if
is,
we're not members of the chamber?
you should be.
Thanks, Robert.
This is a question I need staff to answer to me by
Okay.
Tuesday,
Okay,
okay? I was told by somebody who sounds, a Ward 5 person, sure knows what I'm talking about, sounds like they know what they're talking about. This person says that you are not gonna get a $10,000 a day fine.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
You only get that if you have a plan. You have adopted a plan. You do not have to have an implemented plan. You just have to have a plan. As long as you have a plan, you are not subject to $10,000 fine. I need that answer. Not necessarily tonight, but can you check into that for me?
Oh, Gary, you know.
So Gary, I got the answer she came.
Okay.
Coming from my experience, I worked in enforcement at DEQ for almost 12 years. So
But you're not on Facebook. This guy's on Facebook.
I understand. I will say, so the
okay, I want
$10,000
to wind this up. So let
per
her
day
answer the
per
question.
violation is the statutory maximum. That is the maximum that DEQ can levy as a fine for violations of the Clean Water Act.
They're really
Right,
catchy.
and
That's
the
the biggest
Oklahoma
thing.
Pollutants Discharge Elimination System, right? So that's something to consider. Will they do it? You know, I don't know. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But what they will do, and what I've talked about at the open houses, is over and above whether we get fined $10,000 per day per violation or something less, they're still going to put us under a consent order that then requires that we put certain things into place by a certain timeline, and our ability to do that at our own rate and our own speed goes away. DEQ says you will do this, this, and this by these dates, and if you don't, then there are additional penalties that can be applied for not meeting your consent order dates. So, I mean, those are the things that we encounter. Why would we even consider talking about how much we would spend on fines when we know there's a potential that we have to do it anyway? Let's just come together as a group and figure out what is right for the city of Norman and do it now, and not worry about what DEQ may or may not do in the future.
Well, and let me just give this as an example. This is under what we are supposed to be doing according to DEQ. In FY 2018, we're supposed to be adding a second stormwater, or we were supposed to add a second stormwater field maintenance crew. And we haven't funded that yet. It's in this year's budget. We haven't funded it yet. We're supposed to add a street sweep this year. It's not in the budget.
We're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. That's
So,
what we're saying.
so it's, I mean, we're already in the place where they can say, you haven't done this and you haven't done this, and now you're gonna have to do this. Yes.
I'd like to yield my time to Councilmember Holman.
Who's gonna stand up?
Thank you. Appreciate that. First thing is, I think, and please wait and carry, it's not just a risk of fines, though. There is a point where the lake could be polluted to a point where we can't use it anymore as drinking water.
Well, there's a point where it becomes so costly to treat the water from it that it becomes a challenge. So we either do what we need to do to clean up our stormwater that enters into the lake, or we invest more in our water treatment plant to treat the water that's coming out of the lake. So there's no point where we don't have to pay for some kind of infrastructure or, activity change.
Okay, and another thing, the infrastructure bond, Anthony, what is the lifespan of that bond? Is it 20 or 25 years?
The projections are based on 20-year bonds.
20 years, okay. And it's assumed that we will probably come up with another capital bond when that one's over, or even before it's over.
Right.
I was just going to say that a difference between the utility rate and the bond and what property owners will pay is that the bond does end at some point. The utility rate never will end, and it will actually continue to go up forever as long as voters vote for it. So it's not always, it's not necessarily a equal comparison to say that the bond means that people are paying more. They are, but that bond does end someday.
I think that bond won't get
Now, I believe it will. Yes, I believe it will.
Yeah, well,
Because there's always going to be problems
Right.
that have to get fixed. So, just saying though, there's a little bit of comparison there. I think, well, I spent much time thinking about it. I almost forgot there.
Okay,
I might think about it
while
again.
you have the floor, I'm gonna go down the line here, and I know Councilmember Bierman, not Bierman, Councilmember Clark said before she left, she's on with what Councilmember Scott said. So,
What I was going to
Stephen?
say, the difference I see between commercial and residential properties, I believe commercial property is much more intensely used. You have much more concrete generally in a commercial property than a residential. You have large semi-trucks. You have all-day traffic coming and going, thousands of cars and people coming and going all day long.
well, not from Robert.
Dude, I got one car.
I mean, yeah.
Generally.
Right. But
The city
your
made me put in
business,
25 parking
your
spots. for my
business is
four
in a
employees.
commercial area that is mostly concrete and
I
streets.
didn't want it. Trust me.
I understand. So just saying, I think, although I do agree that there may be some inequity in there, I do think commercial properties are a more intensive use than residential and do cause more damage to, not necessarily damage, but cause more of a stormwater issue than residential property is. So I do think it is somewhat appropriate that commercial pay more than a residential, but I don't know that I'm convinced right now today that this is the most fair way to charge commercials, but yeah.
Well, it would also be my hope that after we do this, that the council will take a serious look at our parking requirements.
Yes.
Yes.
That we don't tell Crest, you have to have 2 acres of parking because of the square footage you have. When I've never seen anybody, Walmart, these big impervious surfaces, you have to do one for 300 square, whatever it is, but an applicant can come in and say, in my situation, Mr. Councilman, you need to have 24 parking spots because of your building. And I say, I would like to make a business decision that I only have 10 parking spots. I feel that's really all I need. And if that's a bad customer service, if I hurt my own business, then I made a bad business decision. But I would rather take that other spot and landscape it or do something with it as opposed to you making me concrete it. So I would like to see that where an applicant has the ability to ask, for a variance to reduce their parking.
Absolutely.
Instead of saying, you
Yeah,
know,
more green space.
and I think that gives us the commitment to, yes, we're not requiring to make the problem worse. And if somebody comes, I just don't need that much. Now, I understand if I did that, if I ever sold my building, next guy comes in and says, hey, I don't have enough parking, that hurts the value of my building. But that's a business risk I take, and I should be able to take that risk as opposed to, so I hope we will consider that as an
Next
amendment.
in line,
you know.
look at a policy. Okay. Councilmember Wilson.
I want to agree with Mr. Castleberry on the parking situation.
Hold it, Amy.
I know. I would also like to see us as a city promote taking out parking lots that are there currently. I think everybody here knows how I feel about the residential. I would like to point out that,
Do you feel, is that 369?
I am okay with, the only way I can support any kind of utility fee is if there's an ag credit. So that's what I have promised to do, that's what I'm standing by. I would like to also point out, so I appreciate the 369 with an ag credit.
Are you stuck on half though? You
I
guys
am
being
not
half?
stuck on half, absolutely not, no.
Could we negotiate that maybe?
I would happily talk to the scientists about that later. But I would also like to point out that I have 3 businesses in this city, and I am happy with the business rate as well. I would like to see the higher tier be higher, but I kind of view that a little bit differently when I see the Johnson Controls that are the ones, and these bigger companies that have to occupy bigger space are actually bringing in employment opportunities. I feel like as a community, we need to support that to a point. Now, I don't necessarily want to support, a million Walmarts and car lots, but I can't really pick and choose which ones I want, so.
Okay, good. They're bringing in jobs, and that's a big contribution. Councilmember Gray.
I too agree, in a perfect world, that the rate structure would be more in line with Councilmember Castleberry's suggestion. I agree with him on the parking. A lot of things you said tonight were very good, so, but I will be in favor of this with the ag exemption that's Rita.
Okay, so that's one amendment then. Robert?
I can live with that. I mean, I've got a lot of ag in my ward. I don't think it really moves the needle, but for $100,000, I think if it's more of a, if it'll help people get more comfortable with it, I don't think we're giving that much up, and I'm going to help people in my ward too, so.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes, certainly.
Let's make the ag credit the same as the low income credit. 30%.
You may be getting both.
30%. He's just saying make it 30% instead of 50%.
Say, that way you can go, if you're a low income or an ag, you get 30% credit.
If you're both, you get 60, theoretically.
If you're both, you would get 60%.
So we didn't identify in that list, because we do have those identified. In the list of residential, there were no low income in the A1, A2, just as an FYI.
All right, I think that's a great suggestion, but there's still just one amendment. If Councilmember Wilson agrees with that we.
I will consider that. I will run it by my decision leaders in my community and see if they accept that. But I want there to be an ag credit.
What would the
so
ag credit be tonight if you had to choose one?
Well, I think I went from 3 to 2, so so that's about 30%, right?
Okay. All right, I think the 30% makes a lot of sense, especially since it's the same.
I don't think the ag people should get a better rate than the low income people.
I think that's a really good point.
Now, I would say, we talked about that earlier, it'd be a little bit less. In our calculations here, we have OU paying 0. Amanda, is that right?
What?
We've got OU paying 0 and all this.
So OU is not currently figured in.
Right, and we.
But we fully expect for a negotiation to happen.
Yes, so that will give.
And that's like
make
bonus.
That might make up for some of that.
Cherry on the sundae, yeah.
Plus, they also have their own anniversary too.
Yeah.
And so, I'm going to have to get comfortable with the HOAs And I got it. I mean, this is what I'm hearing from my people.
Well, I will tell you,
Having that liability.
I will tell you
If we
that
can release that liability, I think that would make a big difference. I think it's gonna get you a lot of votes. And I don't think we're accepting a lot of liability. I think that's an acceptable liability for the city, because it just doesn't happen that much.
yeah, I understand.
But I think it goes a long ways.
We are happy to come and talk to any HOA, and I think that that is a very important audience that we need to educate should this move forward. I think there's a lot of misinformation. I think there's a lot of concern about what happened last time. So if for any more that does have HOAs or neighborhood groups, it doesn't have to be an organized, please let us, or ask them, because that would be a huge help. Should this move forward, ask them if we could come and discuss.
Okay, well, there's about 60 or 70 people at the Ward 3 forum.
Great.
And that was a pretty consensus deal, or loud and clear.
Yeah.
That was
And
a
we're
big
happy,
deal.
I'm happy to go and talk to every single HOA if they want to hear from us personally, to explain things. But I understand
I
your
think
concern.
releasing from liability goes a long ways. And it's the right thing to do. I mean, it's probably the right thing to do, right? We don't hold anybody responsible for the road collapsing.
But what level of liability?
We maintain the road.
We
own the road.
We're gonna
That's
maintain,
on us.
we're gonna maintain the infrastructure too, as we should.
I mean,
We're having crews, right? That's what we're doing. We're cleaning out ditches.
I don't understand that we're maintaining privately owned.
I promise you, if you release from the liability, they'll let you have an easement on their private ponds. Would you not, you think Armor Lakes is gonna not give somebody, not give the city an easement so we can go fix stuff?
Councilman, I might suggest that we think that's a fantastic suggestion. I've heard similar things too. I love Amanda's comments on absolutely education and confirmation and conversation, on that. I love the fact that you guys are coming to a consensus tonight, though. That is fantastic. Let me just tell you how fantastic that is for someone on the committee. I don't want to speak for other people. I am just loving that. And so I know that we're missing a few people here tonight, but gosh, I'm excited about this.
Everybody's agreeing with me, we're getting a consensus. I mean, this is
Okay, here's what my suggestion is. Robert, go in and talk to Catherine and maybe anyone else that is interested in this
You haven't gotten
issue.
Councilman
I know,
Holden's
I'm
consensus
coming
yet,
back.
so-
I apologize. I thought that you were saying that you had not made up your mind, is what I thought, so.
Well, I mean, I'm personally, whatever plan we vote on, I'm voting yes on April 2nd, no matter what it is. So that's not a question. And if we can get close, and I think we are tonight, I mean, I'm going to vote to put this forward on Tuesday, most likely. Just, we hadn't discussed commercial really at all. I'm glad we're discussing it tonight. You know, 3, 6, and 9, I don't really like it that much. I would feel better about that 12 being in there. I do support the ag credits or tier, whatever we want to call it. Although, I mean, I'm just, still, I feel like I really understand where you're coming from and others about taking, if we give credit to one group, other groups being upset about it potentially. Definitely understand that, and that is a concern. But I think that, I think this, what we've talked about tonight is something that I think most voters in Norman will support.
Thank you.
Because it is a problem, everybody knows the problem. This could fix a lot of things. And yeah, I'm in support.
Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm glad I came back, and I apologize. Okay. Anything else? We're right now we have one amendment, and I would hope that anyone that is thinking of anything else will go to the city manager, go to me, so that it can be discussed. But because right now we're closed. Yes, sir.
I just want to say too, that, whatever we're talking about, I really want to, I don't know how practical it is, but I want to have it all pretty solidified by Tuesday. I don't want us to vote to send this forward to a vote, and then next week we're like, oh, well, we're gonna finalize that before April 2nd, I promise.
No, we can't do that, and that's why it's important. I think that's why Councilmember Carter said, we need to talk about what the amendments are gonna be. We need, and several people mentioned it over here. That's why we're all still here talking, so that we can decide that. And right now, everybody on this side of the table that's here has decided that. That's the amendment that they want
The
us
amendment
to.
is simply to add the ag.
Can you state that amendment?
Policy that Robert was talking about is something that we work out in the near term.
30%
It's not
ag credit.
subject to the vote on Tuesday night.
But, right, no, the policy is not to be voted on. The
No, 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 no.
policy
I
is to
just
be
wanna
discussed to
look,
find
I
out
think
what we can do with
we
it.
need to look at that.
Oh, I agree with you.
And
And early on.
if we look at it before April
Okay, so
second,
that doesn't have to be an amendment.
No, I don't want to,
That's a policy.
we got,
Okay, I'm very excited. I
Things
have
work out.
one amendment, just one. But I want to make sure I have it right.
But you really need
It's
two.
the ag tiers, A1, A2. Is it the other factor we had, or just whether or not you're zoned ag?
I would like, yeah, just ag.
I think it's easiest.
Just
Okay.
A1 and
Just-
A2, right now, 30%.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Good work, team. High fives all around. Good job, Robin.
All right. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Okay. Thank you all very much. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you very much.